walked in the house. We'll give her, she's 20 seconds late, but we'll give her credit for that. Okay, so Jeffrey Hurd is 27 seconds late, but we'll give him credit for that. Okay, welcome. This is week number 5 out of 7. So, what does that mean? The suffering is almost over. Oh my, you don't know suffering. You really don't know suffering. So, anyway, you really don't know suffering. So we're going to do, Cynthia, we're going to do some things today that you might find interesting. I don't know. So we have gone through a lot of different material. We've gone through certain areas. You keep repeating it. There are certain areas in which financial reporting or accounting, financial presentation is different or unique for real estate companies. We've covered a few of those areas like leasing is kind of like, so we did leasing because, you know, a lot of real estate transactions are structured as leases. So we've gone through leasing and the nuances related to that. We've dealt with revenue recognition, with sales. We dealt last week with accounting for development costs and why that's important and the whole sort of timeline involved in development cycles and the proper matching of income and expenses. Today we're going to deal with, again, because we keep saying real estate is a capital intensive industry and it lends itself to joint ventures and partnerships. There's a lot of funky ways in which people get together, and so we've got to figure out how we report that. If I own 100% of this, and 50% of that, and 10% of this, and 30% of that, how do I show the world what my financial or what my investments look like? What does my financial condition look like? So we're going to deal with that a little bit today. And I think I said last week, we'll definitely, I like to do a little sort of primer on taxation. It's very brief, very, very brief. I'll throw some concepts out. I'm not a tax expert by any means, but at least just to sort of open your eyes to this whole world out there known as taxation, so that if you have an interest in it, you can then just go on ahead and explore that on your own. Okay? And then we're going to go over the case study. We're going to go over the credit case study. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And then we're going to prepare for the next case study. Right? And let me just go on ahead and jump and say this now. There are 2 case studies left in this class. Okay, so we'll definitely have a case study to do for next week. There are 2 subsequent to that. I'd said from the very beginning, and I still maintain that, if you want to shoot for an A, you've got to do those. If you don't do those, you're just not going to get enough points. They're not easy. They require effort. I'll take some time next week because I think some of the material that prepares you for the case study is material that's relevant for someone that's in a real estate development program. It's difficult material, but ultimately, if you don't walk out of here with those skill sets, if you don't walk out of here with this knowledge, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for you, especially those that are in the development realm, those that are working with development budgets, those that are dealing with costs, cost to date, estimates of complete. It's going to make it very, very difficult for them to work, okay? What I'm going to do, some point midweek, I'm going to go on ahead and send those case studies out. They will not be done, they will not be due next weekend, they'll be due the following weekend. I am also going to send links to a video that I used a couple of years ago to summarize some of that information. I'll go through some of that in class as well, but if you want to get a jump start on it, take a look at the video. It's probably about an hour, hour and a half video. Take a look at the video. You'll learn some concepts, and then you can, sort of like start lining up the case studies that you want. Okay?
So you're saying it's the last 2 case studies at the same time?
That's correct. Because the class originally was an 8-week class, and that's kind of the way I had it set up. And then for some reason it became a 7-week class with an extra half hour, every Saturday, which in a way is probably great because it's one less Saturday to come to class, but then it makes your day a lot longer. But my day's long. I leave here, I go to the office too and work.
Half hour. That half hour.
That half hour is awesome.
I would rather show up for an extra
We cram
Saturday.
so much information into that half hour that, anyway, so I was going to start this week with a question that Kyle asked me, but since Kyle is not here, we can't do it. So if he doesn't get here in time for us to do it. No, it doesn't matter. I mean, he wanted the answer, so if he doesn't get the answer, then we'll come back to it. We'll start on a couple of other things.
You have some questions?
Sorry?
You have some questions?
Did I ask him a question? I just said bring the question to class because it was, I didn't want to, you know, I saw how bad you felt the other day, you know. You were like, you know, it was like your whole, like, it's like, I thought you were gonna like harm yourself or something. You know? I forgot, I had a student, you know, you learn a lot of stuff. So you're dating yourself, right? I'm driving in, I'm listening to Casey Kasem, he's got like 1971 music going on, and it's like the Partridge Family, the Doors. I'm like, wow, and you guys don't know what any of this stuff is, but then you guys know stuff that I don't know. So I had a student a couple of years ago who owned what I call daycare centers. She called them something else. Child learning centers or early childhood
Development centers?
so whatever. I mean, it's a place you take your kid when you work. I mean, but like, you know, you got like the fancier name you give it, it's all marketing. The more you can charge. So, and it was interesting because she had a couple of them and she understood it was a real estate business in a way. I had a student about the same time who was in real estate, but she owned restaurants. And her whole thing was, I'm going to buy a site. It needs the cash flow. And she was a Greek lady, so she'd put restaurants onto places so that there was cash flow coming to support it till she was ready to really redevelop it. It was kind of an interesting, you know, sort of perspective. So anyway, this lady was telling me one day she brought these little stars, and she said when kids do nice things, they get little stars in their hands. Did any of you grow up that way or no?
It was on a chart.
Sorry?
Yeah.
It was on a chart. Like when the stars would be added to a chart.
Oh, they were put. Oh, you didn't get put because.
Because people lose stars.
Oh, because like I've seen kids now do this, kind of like so like you put a
stamp it.
Oh, they stamp it. Okay. So I'm sorry, I don't have a stamp, and I ran out of stars. She did bring me some stars to give the students, but I didn't. Jeffrey.
And your football team, right? Your football coach? Or
The
soccer?
football and soccer, yeah.
Put a stamp on your helmet when you win the game? Sometimes.
I did that many when I used to coach youth football. I used to do that, and then you know what happened was, and everybody wanted to. Then it was like the whole thing was, oh, but I made a play. I should get, you know, whatever, my skull and crossbones, or you know, my little hatchet or whatever it was. You know, we use different things different years. So yeah, I know it's a good point though.
That was a good point.
Good point. You get little Buckeyes if you're at Ohio State, right? You know, the more little Buckeyes you get. So no, I mean, listen, I know recognition's important. So where's the 10-year?
2.08.
2.08.
2.08.
2.085.
2.085. Nathan,
Starting to hear a lot about this inverse
the inversion.
on television.
You're starting to hear it, right?
That's not good. Yeah.
Anthony?
So I also was wondering, the last time when they closed that, was that before or after the Mexico deal was made yesterday in the evening?
Yeah, no, the Treasury Markets closed at some point in the afternoon.
Okay, so that was before the deal.
Yeah, look, my personal perspective is that all these pundits that come out on TV try to justify movements in the market by relating it to something that's happening. So, you know, that whole sort of, we're going to put a 5% tariff on stuff coming from Mexico, I think was just justification for things happening in the market. So, so the 10 years at 2.805, where was it when we started the class 5 weeks ago?
2.467.
2.4 something or other. So again, you know, it's continued to come down, right? And so the whole yield curve has come down. But, and I wrote some of these down, because I can't memorize all of these, but if you do a 3-month treasury, if you buy a 3-month treasury, you get 2.33%. If you buy a 1-year treasury, you get 2.02. If you get a 5-year, you get 1.88. Okay, if you buy a 7-year, you get 2.01, and then if you get 10, you get 2.08. So it's definitely on the shorter end. It definitely is like that, and it kind of shoots up a little bit. But Look, I don't get paid to come out on TV, I'm just telling you, if you go back at least to 1980, which is where I've gone back, in that sense, I think the market does have a certain level of clarity. And when they give you this, you know, people are saying, hey, there's a slowdown coming in growth, you know, so there is a, and what's strange about that is that usually there's some sort of, there should be some sort of relationship that exists between bonds and stocks. And so when the bond market is telling you the economy is slowing down, and part of that is not only inversion, but just overall reduction in interest rates, you know, stock market for 5 weeks went down, and all of a sudden this week it like almost went back up to where it started 5-6 weeks ago. So in like 3 days it recouped 6 weeks worth of losses almost. I think there's some incongruence there. I mean, personally. So again, if you're going to be an investor in equities, that's where I'm putting my bet. My bet is that, you know, it's going to have to be a correction. It's going to take a while, and I think that correction ultimately talks back to earnings and talks back to, you know, economic activity. That's me. I could be wrong, so I'm not trying to say that, but the markets are signaling something, all right? So I had a conversation with a friend of mine that does acquisitions at a real estate group in Dade County, and they've been essentially Florida-centric. They started about 8 years ago. They've been Florida-centric. I got in on several of their deals. I won't do anything with those guys again, but and they've done well. But you know, we keep talking about, you know, and he's pretty much on board with me. I'd rather be a seller than a buyer today. You know, we've had a nice run. Some of the assets they bought, you know, have had nice returns. But it's kind of, you know, it's like you're a gardener, right? You know, you plant, you let bloom, you prune, you know, and eventually you really gotta, like, you know, take stuff out, right, and let it sort of grow and get another. So he curiously said to me that they were looking at, they can't find anything in Florida. They haven't done a deal in over a year. And so he says he's looking at an industrial portfolio in Dallas. So I'm definitely not going to get in for a couple of reasons. Number one, here's a group in Miami going to Dallas. They don't know anything about Dallas. So problem number one. Well, what's the problem? There's a lot of pressure from investors saying, we want to give you money to invest. They're asset managers. They work for fees, right? So what's their pressure? What does he get paid for? What does he get incentivized for? To put money to work. So he's looking for stuff. Says, well, I found this great industrial portfolio in Dallas. Well, I thought you didn't want to buy anything. Well, you know, it's a great deal, and talks back. And money's so cheap. So if you can borrow 70% of an acquisition at 2%, you can justify it. I said, well, what's the cap rate on the deal? He goes, well, it's about 5%. I said, man, how can you buy a 5 cap deal in a city you don't even know? But, you know, he keeps talking back to, you know, if I can pile a bunch of debt, other people's money on a non-recourse basis, maybe it's not such a bad play. So there's a lot of weird things that happen with interest rates. So we talked the other day, we were talking about, you know, were low rates good or bad, and it depends on who you are, right? What it definitely causes is rates, just like tax policy, cause reactions and cause people to behave in a certain way. And so low interest rates to some extent motivate people to do things that maybe may not be prudent, right? So I don't think it's prudent at the end of an economic cycle to buy an industrial portfolio at a 5 cap, right? Especially in a market you don't know, but now you've got something out there saying, yeah, but you can get away with it. Or we think you can get away with it, right? Now, what happens if cap rates go up to 7 on something like that? You know, it's not institutional grade product. It's small bay product. You know, you could easily go to a 7, 8 cap. I mean, you could start losing capital now. So forget your return. You might actually lose capital. I don't know if you guys have ever played. Those of you who've taken the investments class and the finance class, I don't know if you guys have done any sensitivity analysis on all the different variables that go into the return profile in real estate. And, you know, there's 2 huge metrics that I think it's the most important things that you can contemplate in an acquisition of real estate is it cap rate, or you're going in yield if you're developing, right? But what's the relative value at the time that you buy? And your IRR has to have a reversion. You can't have an internal rate of return without contemplating or assuming some sort of sale somewhere down the line. What this tells you is, how am I paying for it now? What's the relative cost to me today in the marketplace? This tells me, what was it worth to me, right? What was it worth to me? What's my return, right? And so when you take a look at IRR in any pro forma, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that's going to impact that, right? So your holding period is going to, impact, because time, all other factors being equal, time is an enemy to internal rate of return, right? The longer money's out, right, the harder it is to keep a return. So your holding period, rents, right, your entry level, and your increase in rents, right? And there's a whole bunch of other factors, your op expenses, blah, 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 blah. But you really get to 2 points that are very, bless you, that are really, really, really very important, okay? One talks to your capital structure, okay? And that ultimately is going to tell you how much leverage are you going to use, and what's the interest rate, what's the cost of debt, right? Just because, so these two have huge, huge impacts on your internal rate of return. The other one talked to cap rates, and ultimately talked to your going in and your coming out, right? And so obviously, when you buy something, if you buy something at 5 and cap rates come down to 4, Brandon, all other factors being equal, is that good or bad? It's bad. Okay, let's try it again. If you buy something and you buy it at a 5 cap, all other factors being equal, if you sell it at a 4 cap, would that be good or bad?
It's good, because it's an increase.
It would be good, because if I have $1 million, somebody pull out their calculator, because if I have $1 million and I buy it at a 5 cap, right, my NOI is $1 million, and I buy it at a 5 cap, what's the implied value of that? 20 million, right? If I can sell it at a 4 cap, what's the implied value of that? What is it, 25? So, pull a calculator out.
25 million.
25, right? So, all other factors being equal, being lucky and letting the market, right, rising tides float all boats, all other factors being equal, there's huge capital appreciation by that. Now, when you're at historic lows in interest rates, right, which are compressing cap rates down, right, how much more potential decrease in cap rates do we have versus the potential risk going up, right? If all of a sudden interest rates start shooting up at some point, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, right? I mean, we're running $1 trillion budget deficits every year. We've got $19, $20 trillion worth of debt. At some point, interest rates are going to go up. At some point, I don't know when, but at some point they're going to go up. At some point, we're going to have inflation. If cap rates go up to 7, somebody do the math for me. If cap rates go from 5 to 7 on $1 million, what's the sales value, Ryan?
What? 14.
14 million. Okay? So, where I'm going with all this stuff is you could execute really well on everything else. You re-tenant the place, you bring rents up the market, blah, 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 blah. But, exogenous factors all of a sudden drive cap rates up and you lose $6 million. So, we got to be very careful when we model how much leverage we use and what our assumptions are vis-a-vis going in and coming out cap rates. And a lot of people give you great potential IRRs. Take a look at the projections people did and say, what did they model going in and what did they model going out? And how much of that gain is ascribed to that? Okay, and there's a lot of times I've seen projections where people are forecasting these huge returns, but they're basically playing games And going back to, if you were to do a data table and just play around with some of these variables, you'll start seeing that these two that I just mentioned here are going to have significantly greater impact than if rents go up from, instead of 2% to 3%, or what occupancy goes up to 92% from 87%. This stuff is where the money's made. Yes, Ryan?
So, because a reversion is inherently far away, you can only look at kind of what reversions of similar properties are. How do you?
Well, reversions are not necessarily far away. So, if we take a look at the styles of investing that we talked about last week, we talked about core and value and opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of different attributes for each one of those styles, right? And I can tell you that definitely one of them that we didn't mention last week is holding period. And in order to achieve the kind of returns that each one, core tend to have longer holding periods. A lot of opportunity type investments are 3 to 5 year periods, max. In fact, I tell you, one of the problems that we had, one of the reasons I didn't like working with these people that, that bought our last company is, whatever we do, when we modeled a development project, I mean, our intention was, at that point, so I said, when I worked with Cadena, we were merchant developers. We developed with a partner to sell. Take our promote and run. When we sold the company Florida East Coast Industries, that was a totally different scenario. There, we were developing to hold. We had 121 buildings in the state of Florida. About 50-50 split between industrial and office primarily. They had a little bit of retail and stuff. It was pretty much office and industrial. But when we looked at when we underwrote projects, we were looking at 10-year hold periods. So these hedge fund guys buy us, these alternative asset management guys buy us, and they're like, okay, you got to take a look at your development with like a 3-year hold. What are you guys, nuts? Who develops? I mean, it's going to take you 3 years to really fully stabilize the asset. Plus, that's not what our game is. Our game is to generate cash flow. And so, going back to, so let me just stop you. I'll let you finish your question, but your assumption on exit is not necessarily 10 years out all the time. Okay, now what was the question? I'm sorry.
So what's a long-term reversion average? Is there anything to like?
Well, but that's all subjective, right? I mean, I'm going to teach the modeling class in the fall. I don't know those of you who've taken it, what you've done or not done. But, I was talking to Dr. Forgy the other day on the phone, and what I told him is, for me, one of the more valuable components is, so I could sit here and beat Excel, to your head till you're like silly, right? Boom, you will learn Excel, you will learn Excel. But you won't learn Excel unless you want to. I know that. I really know. And I know Dr. Forgy knows that, and I know his frustrations with that, and I know my frustrations with that in the program. But for me, what's more valuable is understanding the inputs. And so, garbage in, garbage out. But good stuff in, you get good output. So, how do you determine what your exit cap is? Well, I mean, you got to grab it out of the air. But that's why it's important to understand trends in the economy and figure out where you think cap rates are going to go. I mean, a conservative way to model a real estate development is always to assume that your exit cap is at a higher rate than your going in cap. How much? Well, I mean, I would tell you in today's environment, most people probably use a 50 basis point. They use like, if you go in at 6, they assume a 6.5 going out. Because if you assume an 8, the model doesn't work. But you might have to assume an 8 if you hold something for 10 years. You just don't know. But that's why they're forecasts, and they're not certain. You got to do the best you can. So, all right. I can't see what to do because All right, let me do a couple of things. I found this one. I was preparing my book yesterday. I found this one. I cut this out from a newsletter that I get, and it talks about covenants. We had talked about covenants the other day, and we didn't really spend a lot of time on it. But I thought this was an interesting way that these guys summarized it. Okay, so it's what are covenants, and what do they do? Debt covenants ultimately protect against over-borrowing. Now, this is from a credit newsletter, okay? So understand, this is looked at from a lender's perspective. So they protect against over-borrowing. Lien covenants guard against the risk of a senior creditor being made junior by management's willful layering of secured debt above the senior debt.
Can you repeat that?
Well, let me put it easily. Let me put it easily. Lien covenants, so a covenant related to lien prohibits a borrower from putting other liens on the property. That could be, you know, junior or senior. Typically, the biggest concern is that someone would jump you in priority. But a lot of lenders don't even let you do second mortgages below them. They just don't want any other creditor involved. Okay, so they're going to prohibit you from further encumbering the property. Restricted payments covenant deter companies from putting some cockamamie investment scheme rather than paying the lenders as they ought to. So stop to think. You can't pay bonuses, you can't pay dividends, you can't do salary increases. I mean, there are all kinds of covenants along the way which restrict payments out of the company. Why? Because they want cash flow going to service the debt. And change of control covenants mitigate the risk of a company being sold out from over-trusting creditors who lent it the money. Okay, so no change of control provisions. You know, you might be in default if certain key managers leave, etc. So I thought this was just kind of an interesting thing. Did you, John, were you able to take a look? We had a question last week on escrow.
No, I did not.
Okay, so you can do it for another point next week. The question we had last week was whether deposits on leases needed to be escrowed, and my belief was that they did not, but there was some concern on, or some thought on that. I'm going to get to some of the other things in a second. Yeah, let me jump to those. I want to jump a couple of. I don't have a lot this week. Because I wanted to spend some time on. There's a guy that died last week named Bart Starr. I don't know if any of you know who Bart Starr was.
Yeah.
Bart Starr was a quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. He led them to 2 Super Bowls. Very humble and hardworking man. Played at Alabama, went to Green Bay, and then when he finished playing, it's totally different than, you know, the guys now that, you know, then they get arrested with the Ferraris and all that. You know, it's, you know, and they come out in, like, you know, their club space with a gun or whatever. I mean, totally different type. Listen, we played against, a few years ago, we played against a kid at Booker T. Washington who's been arrested 3 times this year, and he's on the Dolphins roster. It makes no sense to me, but whatever. So Bart Starr said, simple, if you work harder than somebody else, chances are you're going to beat him even though he has more talent than you do. It's pretty simple. Work hard. It's going to get, what's talent's going to give you, it's going to, I mean, hard work is going to trump talent most of the time. Maybe not all the time. Okay, and maybe in athletics, you know, God-given talent sometimes, you know, trumps hard work. But a couple of things. Somebody mentioned self-storage facilities, you know, as an asset class. And that's kind of been an evolving trend over the last 30 or 40 years. And they're all over the place. I didn't realize there was an article in National Real Estate Investor this week that this year there are 800 self-storage facilities opening up in the country. And they've been having as many as 1,500 a year. I mean, everywhere you drive, you see them popping up everywhere, right? It's like, we just keep putting junk away and never... A friend of mine owned 3 of them at some point, and he started progressively selling them about 6 years ago. And he just says, I'm not out of the business, I was just a seller. You know, when prices come back to earth, I'll buy again. But I don't know a lot about the dynamics here. But I started reading it, and it just says, it talks to supply and demand. It's saying that, you know, and all of a sudden, there's been an overbuilding over the last few years. It's depressed rates, and it's increased concessions. So come in, similar to, you know, kind of follows the multifamily game. Come in, we'll give you 3 months, you know, off to a 15-month lease, things like that. But, you know, it's saying, you know, hopefully that, you know, there's fewer groundbreaking. So from 800, they're expecting only 200 coming into the market in 2020. So you already know from the development cycle, you can already see how far down the line. it's just kind of interesting. It says, when things are overbuilt, and this is what happens in real estate, when things are overbuilt, it says the discount streets, they discount rents to fill up. It's a race to the bottom. So ultimately, people are continually fighting for occupancy. And I've seen that. I've seen 10 years, similar to what I said with the stock market the other day, they said like 6 weeks of drops, all of a sudden you lose in 2 or 3 days. In real estate, I see that with rents. It could take you 10 years to build rents up to a certain level, and in 6 months you can come all the way down because, you know, people drop their shorts to make sure tenants don't go away. Because people want cash flow. People don't want empty space. So a lot of times you're just competing against yourself. Well, what I thought was kind of interesting here, again, I didn't know anything about the metrics, and it just basically said developers opened roughly 150 self-storage facilities totaling 15 million square feet in the first quarter of this year. So I thought, okay, let me start assuming certain stuff. Let me learn a little bit about this. So first thing I learned is 15 million square feet, 150 facilities. What's the average size of a self-storage facility? 100,000 square feet. So, and that's what I've heard, it's about 100,000 square feet, okay? They used to be all flat, now they're, you know, starting to go this way, okay? So I started making some assumptions. So I thought, okay, let's just assume that people charge, well, I kind of worked backwards, and I said, okay, let's assume it's like an industrial facility, especially in major cities. Land is going to be a big component. Let's use $200 a square foot is what it costs to build these things, okay? Now, it's not what they used to cost when they were, you know, in a rural area sort of spread, but if you're thinking, you know, a major metro with a huge land component, and now you're building 5 or 6, let's use $200 a square foot. I said, so it's 20 million bucks to build this thing. Let's assume these things are trading at a 5 cap, because that's what you hear they kind of trade at. So what kind of NOI does that throw off? It throws off about $1 million bucks. So I said, well, if it throws off $1 million bucks, and what does that imply about what the net rents are? Let's use a 90% occupancy factor. And all of a sudden I came up with like $12 net rent. And I said, okay, if net rents are $12, what should gross rents be? How much should operating expenses be in a self-storage facility?
Probably like
Pretty low. Low.
10%, 5%.
35%. 15.
Well, we don't, other than multifamily, we don't talk in op expenses as a percentage of rents. We talk about absolute dollar amounts. So they can ultimately work back to a percentage, right? What would op expenses be in a traditional industrial setting?
I'll call it $1.
Yeah, $2, $1, $2.
Okay, well, so in a typical industrial setting, you're probably saying in a market like South Florida, you're going to be paying $3 to $4 a square foot for industrial. Now, there is a difference. A lot of these places have live-in people, you know, managers that you got to pay for. So I'm going to assume it's a little bit more. So I thought if it's like $12, it's probably about $5 to operate this thing. So asking rents are probably about $17. So I said, okay. So that means like a 100 square foot place that you rent at 10 by 10 box probably costs $170 a month. So I went online and looked at a couple places. It's kind of what it is. Then I went to Public Storage. Which is the biggest REIT, right? And curiously, their average rents across the network are $17.50 a square foot, and their average occupancy is 92%. And so I took one little bit of thing. I started assuming stuff from what I knew in the market, and I got to some metrics that I could then validate. And all of a sudden, in 15 minutes, I learned something about the industry. But I challenge you guys to do that with, you know, we haven't done this. Right? What's flex space?
Half office, half industrial.
Half off. Is it industrial or is it office?
I'm going to call it closer to industrial.
It's obvious because of.
So you say you could use it for both. What? So if somebody's going to talk about subclasses, would flex be a subclass of office or would it be a subclass of industrial?
Industrial. Nah,
So it's industrial with a large office component. So you know, you see that a lot in small base stuff where you've got, you know, sort of like business operators in there. So like they've got their office and their showroom in the front and distribution in the back. So what sort of typifies flex space is that you've got a very high office component and you could as a proxy use 50%. Now, because of that, it's a challenging asset class, and it's one that's very difficult to market, okay? It's difficult to build, it's difficult to buy, and it's difficult to sell when you own it. Because people, there's a lot of dollars, so office is tough. Office, you make money when you sell. We already talked about the TI. We'll talk in the credit case study that we did today, how much you got to put out in order to, you know, do TI, and you know, leasing commissions you got to do. So, but you know, you guys can play with yourselves. You know, assume you know, 1 million square foot industrial asset that's really flex, and try to figure out what rents might be. Try to figure out what cap rates might be. I'll tell you, cap rates are going to be higher. So industrial in South Florida is like 5, maybe flex might be 7, might even be 8. Using that, you know, work back to yourself and start coming up with some sort of metrics on what rents should be, you know, what costs might be. Challenge yourselves. That's how you learn. Nate, you had a question.
Just that I don't understand exactly what it is then. What is flex?
So I'm trying to think. Okay, I'll give you an example. Have you, what's the street up there? Nova? Like,
University?
no. So if you go like to college, or this one's college.
Davy Road.
Okay.
There's a cross street called Nova and 30th.
Yeah,
Okay, if you go east of here, going towards Broward College, and you make a left,
Yeah.
and you make a right at the first traffic light,
Yeah.
it takes you over to like, where there's like a Speedway and a CVS.
Yeah.
On the way there, there's some warehouses there that are owned by,
Bergeron.
huh?
I'm just guessing, I have no idea.
No, McFadder's a technical school on the other side. I forget, it's like, it's a REE, I'm sorry?
595 Commerce Center?
No, it's
It's got public, well, next to Publix.
next door there's a public, there's some industrial there, and when you go by, and so it looks like industrial, okay? It's like street level industrial, right? And there's like a yoga studio in one of them, you know, and then there's like a sewing machine guy or something. He's got his showroom here and he's got his distribution in the back. And so it's an industrial box that just happens to have a very large component of office in front. So where typical industrial would have, you know, less than 10% office build out, Flex is going to have as much as 50% office build out. Okay? It might have a call center, you know, so it's a huge office use inside of an industrial product.
And the term flex is based off of how you can use it for so many different things?
Because it's flexible that way, right? It can be one or the other. I mean, you could always knock out all the office and use it as industrial, right? Or you can build it all out and use it as office, you know, but it also needs to have different parking components because you've got more of an office component. Okay, so,
Usually park it on individual uses.
I'm sorry?
Usually park it with individual uses in the building.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, so definitely office is going to have a much bigger parking requirement than industrial, so then you got to account for more parking. That means you need more land to develop it. So I mean, there's a lot of challenges associated with it, but there's needs out there. Good and terrible bosses, what to know. Congratulations, this is from this week, recent college grads. I mean, I know you guys aren't all necessarily recent college grads, but how can you start on the right foot? So 4 or 5 things. I mean, simple. You should know these. Keep it professional. While it's nice to be friendly and make friends in the office, don't get too chummy, especially with the office, with the boss. Just, you know, personal advice. Always be professional and friendly, but don't be friends with them because, you know, things could come back and hurt you. And careful with personal relationships at work. Don't want to go any further than that. They have bad endings. Just as your new boss will be evaluating you, you have an obligation or responsibility to evaluate your boss as well. And, you know, see how they function and learn what their triggers are, okay? So people are constantly looking at you, take a look. Everyone's gonna be different, and there's gonna be better bosses and worse bosses, okay? And frankly, if you have a bad boss, you kinda gotta deal with it anyway, right? I remember I said something really mean to somebody one day. Somebody came into work. No, I mean, somebody came in and said, oh, you know, I've had a really bad day or whatever. And I said, look, I'm really sorry. I go, let me tell you the way life works. I'm your boss. If you have a bad day, it's your problem. If I have a bad day, it's also your problem. Okay, now that's a really mean thing to say. That's a really mean thing to say, but you know, there are good bosses and there are bad bosses, and bosses have bad days too and all that, but you know, you've got to figure it out. And the last thing they kind of talk about here is that you should always, one of the things is, there's no magic numbers to how long you should stay in your first job. Now they say here a minimum of a year is a good ballpark number, unless somehow your job becomes unbearable. Probably should stay in the job more than a year, any job, anywhere along the way. And one of the things I always look at when I look at resumes is how many jobs have people had the last few years. And you see, especially in sort of like marketing jobs, and you see people that like switching jobs every year, and you say, why am I going to hire this person and train them? They're going to be gone in a year. Because again, past behavior is pretty indicative of future. No pain, no gain. In college, it doesn't, no one cares how you get the work done as long as you get it in. But in the workplace, rules are different. And you've got to buy that. Play by the rules, even if it means putting extra hours to finish a project. You've got to show commitment to your new job. In the workplace are rules that you've got to abide by. So if I was thinking about this when I was reading this yesterday, if you come to my office, it's spotless. It's spotless. I was always, my brother and I always shared a room growing up, and my brother was always like a super neat guy, and I was always like, you know, the pig. And that kind of started changing in college. I had like a real pig for a roommate the last 3 years. I mean, he was like a real pig. And so that kind of started changing my perspective, because you know, you sort of, you know, you do the opposite, right? And then I got out of college, and well, my brother and I got an apartment, and I come home and I throw like my suit on, like I have one of like those dresser things. Like on Friday, I have like 5 suits on the thing and all that. And then Saturday, my brother would go out and play, and I'd spend half Saturday cleaning up my room, trying to get ready. And I said, no, something's not right here. You know, get home, put stuff away. But what really changed me was we had a client, and it was a terrible client, and then, you know, they all wound up going bankrupt and all that, but the owner was a very persnickety, he was a real estate developer, very persnickety guy. It was all about image. And he came in one day, and I was the senior on the audit engagement, and he came in one day and he called me into his office, and he started yelling at me, what a fucking place. And basically, you know, we'd leave, and we had our room, and our room was a mess. And he said, this is my office, and you guys are going to leave it the way my desk is. And I learned, and I really changed my whole life, and it changed the way I work. You know, it's like you leave at the end of the day, you organize everything. You know, those desks with papers. You know, disorder is a sign of a sick mind. You know, I know everybody works differently, but learn. That's one of the things that I always tell people: go work at a big company when you start, because you're going to learn best practices. Hopefully you're going to learn best practices. You're going to learn how other people do things. If you go work for a small guy, oh, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. I want to do my own thing. But then you don't learn how other people do things. Okay, so it's important to learn when, look around, okay? Leave that. I wanted to cover this concept, then I'll come back to Kyle's thing. I get a newsletter from a mortgage broker out in the West Coast every week. I don't know how I got on their mailing list, but I got on it years ago, and I always find it interesting to take a look at deals that they're underwriting. Because it lets me know where the market is, number one, and number two, it tells me what people are doing. So, first one, this is from this week's newsletter. So this is their marketing thing. Hey, And then they'll have a thing, hot money, you know, we've got a lender that, you know, is looking for this or whatever. So a couple of different things. So first one, it says a $15 million non-recourse financing for the acquisition of a 17 property, single tenant Dollar General portfolio. So it's, we talked about CVS and Walgreens a couple weeks ago when we talked about leases. A lot of retailers will do these triple net lease deals. They will find a site, they will develop it into an SPV, and then they will sell that SPV. They'll get the financing and then they'll sell the SPV to an investor who basically is just getting a yield, just getting cash, okay? In some cases, they don't even get cash. It's just all the debt goes, all the cash flow from the rent goes to service the debt. I'm sorry, my dad is sick, so I gotta, it goes to service the debt. So I mean, we bought some triple net leases once, we never got any cash out of it, but the cash flow coming in serviced the debt. So, you know, you owed X when you bought it, and you owe X less whatever you serviced. So that's where you made your money, was from the reduction in the debt. So I didn't know this, but Dollar General does the same thing. So they built 17 stores, they went and got money, you know, financing, and then they sell these to an investor. Now, listen to the deal. 4.5% fixed for 14 years. 5 years interest only, 30-year amortization thereafter. So, kind of curious. So it's got both an IO, so you know, there's a bunch of different ways to service debt. Interest only, right? You always got to pay interest only. And then rather than being fully amortized, it's only partially amortized, so there's a much longer amortization period. And then you've got a bullet payment at the end of 14 years, okay? Loan to value, 75%. Prepayment, and that's what I wanted to spend a little bit of time on. Defeasance. And then lender fees, none.
Is a bullet the same as a balloon?
It could be a balloon. It's what's outstanding at the completion of a term.
Or so just pay it off?
Yeah, so I mean, if it were if you had a fully amortizing loan, right, over 14 years, at the end of the 14th year,
So paid off.
it would be paid off. But if you're amortizing over 30, you're going to have an outstanding balance at that point. Now, you can call it a balloon. You could say, hey, I could have interest only for 10 years, and in the 10th year, I've got a balloon payment. You call it whatever you want to call it. I just call it a bullet payment. But yes, it's the same concept.
Okay.
Same concept. Okay. What is defeasance?
When use something else to cover the debt, like treasury notes, bonds.
Yeah, but give me the concept. What, I mean, you're kind of giving me the mechanism of what you're doing.
It's like getting out of a loan.
Okay, but it talks about prepayment.
Yes.
So, I mean, I know this is covered in the Brueggemann book somewhere. I don't know if you guys have covered this in finance. So when we talked about credit last week, and we talked about the case study, we talked about what's the single biggest risk that a creditor has.
Money.
Default. Default is probably the biggest one because you don't get paid back. But being a creditor, there are more risks than just default, right? So inflation, being paid back in dollars that are less than the dollars you loaned, for example, right? There could be taxability issues, right? You know, you got to pay tax on what's going. Well, probably the second biggest risk that a creditor has, that depends on the creditor profile, is reinvestment risk. Now, what's reinvestment risk?
Opportunity cost?
No, not that path. When you talk, Jeffrey, about opportunity cost, what do you mean by that?
The cost you could have made in an alternative investment.
I wouldn't look at it that way either.
Changing
I mean, it is you have the money and you're not able to get opportunity that you
Okay,
had.
so I loaned Jack $1 million at 10%. Why would Jack prepay me?
Interest rates are low.
Because
Because interest rates come down to what?
9 or anything below.
8%.
8%.
So he's like, I'm not gonna pay this sucker 10%, I'm gonna go borrow from somebody else and only pay 8%, right?
Yeah.
So now he pays me back $1 million, right? Now I was making 10, what can I reinvest in
8.
at 8, okay? Now you're gonna say, well, what does it matter? Well, you gotta stop to think that most people are matching. If you look at, bless you, if you look at somebody's balance sheet, right? If you look at a bank's balance sheet, they loaned you $1 million, right? At 10%, but they borrowed $1 million from somebody. And they've made a commitment to that person somehow. Or an insurance company has made a commitment to somebody. You know, these variable annuities, I'm gonna guarantee you X. And so this is a real risk.
Yeah.
How do people mitigate reinvestment risk when you're a lender?
To charge you prepayment penalty.
Make rules.
To charge you prepayment penalty.
Through prepayment penalties,
Yeah.
okay? So when we talk about commercial real estate, we've got what I'm gonna call 4 layers of, or 4 levels of, so we're gonna call this call protection. Call protection. Okay? So you can't call the debt. Can't call the debt. Can't satisfy it, okay? There's 4 levels. First level is going to be a lockout period. You guys haven't done this anywhere else in the program? Okay, it's important. It's important stuff in commercial real estate debt.
Levels.
There's 4 levels, 4 different ways to address it. How lenders address call protection. How they protect themselves from a borrower essentially calling the debt, right? So what's a lockout period? That's the first sort of layer. What's a lockout period? Yes, Anthony?
Would that be the period that you're not allowed to leave the loan?
Leave, you can't prepay. So you are precluded as a borrower from prepaying debt. You're typically going to see this when you're dealing with fixed rate loans, okay, because there's some sort of matching somewhere along the way, fixed rate loans, and you're going to see it typically or traditionally with a couple of type lenders that you see in real, you're going to see that definitely with life insurance companies, okay, and you're going to see that with securitized debt, okay, CMBSs. Okay, so you're typically always going to see all of this somehow there. You may see it with commercial banks as well, because they may have to, if they're doing long-term financing for you now, they're likely going to match. But you're definitely going to see it always with a life insurance company. You're always going to see it with securitized debt. So first one's a lockout period. You are precluded from repaying the loan. You borrow $10 million to buy this building, you can't repay it. Can't repay it. How long are lockout periods? They can run 2 to 3 years, okay? I mean, that's all to be negotiated, but you potentially could be locked out. Somebody's going to give you a nice, they're going to give you a nice rate. They're going to give you 4.5%. They're going to give it to you for 14 years. They're going to give you 5 years of interest only. They're going to give you everything you want, but then you got to live to your bit of it. So you're likely going to be locked out from prepayment 2 or 3 years. Going back to your holding period, core asset, can't sell it. Okay, so that's the first layer that people are going to do. The next layer is going to be a simple prepayment penalty. Now, what might a simple prepayment, and you don't see these things that much anymore. Simple prepayment penalties might be, 6%. Well, people are going to give you some sort of multiple, pay me a year or pay me 2 years worth of interest, okay, or pay me 6 months, payments as a penalty or something. People are a lot more sophisticated than that. They now come to a different layer. First one's what's called yield maintenance. Does anybody know what yield maintenance is?
It's the yield that the bank is supposed to make, so their internal IRR or something would be then maintained by charging a fee if you were to break that or deviate from that IRR.
So let's put it in the terms that we had. I have a loan, I'm a lender, and I loan money at 10%. For me to reinvest that, typically people are referring to some sort of index, okay? Interest rates have come down, the borrower wants to prepay the loan. Now, I can only reinvest at 2% less. Yield maintenance says, okay, you gotta take a look at the term remaining on the loan, and you essentially have to make good on the 2% that I'm losing out. Okay, but the loan's gonna be, you can repay it, but at the time that you repay it, you've gotta make up for what's left on the term at that spread. Okay? Simple? The higher level of this, and what you definitely see with securitized debt, life insurance companies, not as much, with debt securitized is defeasance. Okay. Defeasance basically says you do not repay the debt. You do not repay the debt, but you create a trust and you fund the trust with money. What people use are strips, treasury strips. You essentially create a, so let's say that the monthly payment on this was $1,000 a month, okay? And you've got 120 payments left, okay? Okay? And each one is due on the 30th of the month, okay? You create a trust and you buy 120 different T-bill strips, one that matures at the end of month 1, one that matures at the end of month 2, one that matures at the end of month 3, and you buy them so that the payments that you would have made as the borrower, the trust is now going to make. Okay? And so the lender will release his lien from the property, but will take ownership rights or beneficiary rights to this trust. And all you're basically doing is saying is, you know, you're replacing the original cash flow that the lender agreed to. We don't want the money. We don't want yield. I don't want to deal with any of this stuff. I just want my coupon every month. So you send me the coupon, and in the case of a secured, and you know, the trustee will get it, and you'll send it to all the individual bondholders. That's all they want to know about. Okay? Yes, Oz.
What can be used for defeasance besides,
I've only seen T-bills. I don't know what else. I mean, you probably could put cash in there. You know, that would be my guess. You wouldn't want to put cash necessarily because you'd have to put more cash, right?
for the time?
Because you can buy these at a discount, right? So you know the lowest cost is going to be buying the T-bills. I'm sure you could put cash. You might be able to somehow put an irrevocable letter, standby letter of credit, but I've just seen T-bills. Questions on this? Yes, Nate.
So, using all four of those methods, as far
Well, you're likely gonna have a combination. You're likely gonna have a lockout period and either yield maintenance or defeasance, let's say, or prepayment. You'll see some prepayment, you know, penalties every now and then.
but in the end, the owner or the lender and the borrower are going to be out the same amount of money, approximately. Or one's going to receive.
The goal is that the borrower is going to make the lender whole to what he or she would have gotten at the time that they made the loan.
Yeah.
So they've said, look, I'm going to promise you this, and you're promising me this cash flow. Basically, what you're telling the guy is, I'm going to give you the cash I promised you. Now, what happens here is sometimes it becomes very costly to dispose of a property, right? Because people would say, well, you know, how do I got to come up with all this extra money to pay off the debt. Interest rates have gone down, all of a sudden I come up with all this extra money because it's a cost to to the borrower. You're questioning that, Jack.
Well, yeah, because for sophisticated investors, do they really want to have that money and give it the block to somebody?
Do they really want to what?
I mean, as a sophisticated investor, if I have that money, I mean, I would not really want to give it as a block to somebody that I lent the money from, because maybe.
But you may not have choice. If you own an asset and you've got to somehow deal with debt, you got to deliver the asset unencumbered. So you've got to pay off the debt, and all of a sudden you've got an extra charge to pay off the debt. Instead of paying 10 million off, you got to pay 10 million, plus you've got to make them whole. So I'm just saying there's an extra cost to selling a property, right? If you've got these provisions. So again, going back to, there's a lot of advantages to having fixed debt, but then you got to understand all the different conditions associated with it and what the implications of that might be going to the future. Again, if 10-year treasuries are at 2% and you're going to borrow money at 4.5%, the likelihood, logic would tell you today that 3 years from now interest rates are not going to be at 0. But if they are, you're going to have a problem. Maybe not a problem, but you may not be able to sell the asset for 2 or 3 years. And there may be a cost to doing so when you do it, which may or may not make it worthwhile or viable for you to sell. Okay? All good with that? Okay. Kyle asked me a question which was, is it a good time to buy a house?
That's deep.
Yeah, we can spend a lot of money on that.
It's
A lot of time on
depends.
that.
It's depends, though.
So,
If you buy a house,
I mean, let me read. I'm going to read. I'm going to read something from the Miami Herald this morning, and then we'll talk about it. In the fourth quarter of last year, there were 995 single-family homes in Dade County under $300,000. By May of this year, there were only 870 houses under $300,000. If you go to Broward, there are only 670 houses under $300,000. If you increase the level to 350, then there's more supply, and you get another 500 in both each Dade and Broward County. But you're still talking about 1,400 houses in Dade and about 1,000 houses under 350. Why is 350 important? The median sales price of a single-family home in Dade County was $350,000 in the first quarter of this year. And in Broward, it was $355,000. So basically the same thing, $350,000. Condos are lower, $230,000 in Dade County, $165,000 in Broward. But you know, these aren't the high-rise condos in Los Olas and you know, Brickell. This is like Lauderhill and Homestead and you know, stuff like that. And so it's you know, totally different. So the first thing is you got to do the math, right? If you're going to buy a house, right? So what is somebody coming out of college today make? Let's use a number.
$45,000.
$45,000. Okay, let's just say somebody makes $45,000 a year. You want to say they're married?
No.
They're not married. So they're saying, oh, they're married. You don't get married. You don't marry. Do you buy a house with your significant other or? No. You rent.
Yes.
Yeah, you rent. Okay, so let's just assume, let's just say a single person makes $45,000 a year. Okay? Now, let's just use the median sales price for a single-family home in Dade or Broward County. Let's say it's $350,000. Okay? Now, how much of that can you finance?
Up to 97% within FSA.
Well,
Is that the right
let's
answer?
use. I don't know what the right. Let's use.
Say a lot of things.
I'm trying to just be. Let's use 90%. Let's use 90%. Can we use 90%?
Okay.
We can use 90%. So the first. So the first obstacle you gotta come in, what's 10% of this? $35,000. So what's the likelihood of somebody making $45,000 a year having $35,000 to put into a house? It's tough.
About 10
Tough,
years.
tough. Well, okay, tough, okay, tough.
Especially with student loans.
Okay, but let's assume,
Student loans, that's
let's
nothing.
assume that your parents give you that, or you have it stashed in your piggy bank or something, okay? So, what does that mean that you gotta borrow? How much you have to borrow? Three what, 15? Okay, so, let's assume that we can get a 30-year mortgage, right? What's a 30-year mortgage today gonna cost for $300,000?
3.5.
Probably more?
Four-
Can we use
4%.
Let's use 4. Let's use 4.
Good credit.
Okay.
You got good credit.
Can somebody do 315 present value, 4%, and 30-year? What's the payment on that?
It's about 1,300.
That seems low to me. Can somebody else give me that same number? I come up. I came up with 1,500.
No, I did not.
Not that much.
That's less than
315
Oh, I didn't clear it.
present value, 360 and 4 payment. I come up with $1,503. Armando, what did you come up with? Or you on Instagram liking?
I got 18.
I'm following you.
Yeah, why are you turning red now? Okay, dude, sit in the back and put it on your lap so that they don't know you're like, okay. $1,500.
Yeah, 1,500.
$1,500. Okay, what do we think property taxes are on a house that costs $350?
$9,000.
1.3%.
400 a month.
It's about 2020.
Hold on, I got a single family guy. Guy sells single family homes here.
1.30% of the sales.
1.30% of the
For the
sales.
first year, and then based on the sales value afterwards.
So like $4,000?
For new homes, yeah.
I don't think so.
For the first year.
No, that's what
Based on the sales value.
I'm just judging from what I paid. I'm doing around $9,000, $9,500 a year.
Yeah, but how much did you pay for the house?
No, around 30.
So you paid $9,000 in Doral?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm paying.
Okay, let's just make it easy. Let's say $5,000. So let's say $500
Yeah,
a
but
month.
I have home exemption as well.
$500 a month. Now, since we're borrowing, we gotta pay for insurance. Now, we should have insurance anyway. How much is insurance gonna, let's just assume you don't live in Key Biscayne, because then insurance is prohibitive. Now you're in like Weston. How much would insurance cost?
1,800, 1,500.
I was gonna use 2,000, can we
Yeah,
say
yeah.
$200 a month? Just $200 a month? Okay,
And you
$200.
have mortgage insurance since you own it.
Yeah, okay, so how much do we want to quote for PMI, $100?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we need $2,300 a month. We need $2,300 a month. Hold on, just to service the debt. Now, let's assume we have no student loans. Let's assume we have no credit card debt. Let's assume we don't go out. Let's assume we don't eat. Let's assume we don't buy clothes. So, okay. If you make $45,000 a year,
It's possible, you're like, you're.
Hold on, but let's just do this. So if you make $45,000 a year, if you make $45,000 a year, how much do you pay for Social Security?
Oh my gosh.
0.0765, right? So we're already down,
17.5% income tax.
we're already down $3,400. And how much tax are we gonna pay if we make $45,000 a year? What's the percent?
17.5.
On the margin, we're at 22%.
I thought it was 17.5 for the overall from the income here in Florida.
it's 20.
In Florida, what are you talking about?
We don't
Like
have
the
state
overall
tax.
Federal
What are you talking about, Willis? I mean, that was another show from.
Strokes, no one
That was
does
different
that.
strokes, yeah. That's- Oh, you know that one?
What was it? I found this through some,
You found it on
Website.
Investopedia?
no.
Oh, I just checked. No,
A good
hold
site.
on. So I'm looking at the Journal of Accountancy tax year 2018 tax rates. So if I were to tell you that on the margin, you're at 22%. So at the lower, at up to 38,000, you're paying 12. So let's use 17 as a percent. Let's use 20%, okay? So what's 20% of this?
Too much.
What's 20% of this? $8,000, right? Whoa, whoa.
It's actually not.
Well, now you say, oh, but we got a personal deduction, don't we? Don't we get a personal deduction? What's a personal deduction this year?
10,000?
Yeah, it's like $12,000, right? So it's really,
Oh, so that's 8.
right? So it's 33, right? So it's 33, right? And then, so now we're at 12%, so we're only gonna pay $3,500, okay? So not 7,000, so now we make $3,800 net every month. I mean, for the year. What is that per month?
3,000?
$3,100 a month.
You're gonna put the $66 now, because now we're getting low.
Okay, 3166. Okay, so now you're gonna have $866 to eat, pay your electricity, pay your internet, car,
Closing costs?
clothes. Does it work? Kinda tough,
Better buy a house in
kinda tough, so, okay, now, well, so the problem is you can't get much cheaper than that, right? So, how, you know, what are the alternatives to all this stuff, right? So, the easiest alternative is say, if I don't have this, if I don't have that, I gotta rent it. How much are rents in South Florida per square foot?
$2 a dollar.
So this, $2 a month? How big a unit do you want? 800, let's get a small one.
600?
600, why? You're living in a shoebox. Okay? Okay, let's say 700. So you're paying $1,400 a month. I mean, yeah, so that's gonna work a little bit better, but you're not accumulating any equity now, you're not accumulating any value, right? So, you know, option number one is rent. For a long time, for probably a 30-year period, from a financial perspective, assuming that you could invest the money that you have, you're better off investing your money and renting, okay? But in the long run, in this country, the equity you build on your home winds up being most people's single biggest source of their net worth, of their personal value, because it's forced savings. So, I can't answer your question, Kyle. I can't answer your question.
All that to say
I will say this, in spite of all of this, I will say this.
Well-
I will say this.
If you would have bought a house in 2012, what would it, you know, you would have tripled your money basically, so.
Well, but yes, but no, because you can't sell it, right?
You can't?
Where are you gonna
where you
live?
gonna live?
What are you, like, just gonna get like a sleeping bag and go to the Everglades? I mean,
Triple my money, I can live anywhere I want, I can
yeah,
rent,
but the
I can rent.
problem is, if you tripled your money and you sell where you're gonna buy, unless you go to Tupelo, Mississippi, right?
Right.
And maybe you want that, maybe it's a great place to live, I don't know, okay? But unless you move somewhere else, everything else you're gonna buy will have tripled as well.
My point is, it's not gonna triple if you buy it now, so.
I mean,
Well,
a good
if-
time to
but the
buy?
problem is, we don't know, so,
We don't know, but.
we don't know, so, hold on, let me just finish my advice, and then you guys can give him your advice. When I got out of college, my brother and I rented an apartment from one of our friends' dad. I mentioned this the other day, it was on Brickell Avenue, and it was in Clotten Island. There was one building there at the time. There was a developer named Charlie Cheesem. He built Brickell Place. All these people were buying, flipping. It was like, this was late 70s, people were flipping condos in South Florida. This is like a millennial thing, like this is, and a lot of Venezuelans were coming, surprise, surprise. And all of a sudden, Venezuela blew up. The currency went from 4.3 to like $13 overnight, 13 to the dollar overnight. And all of a sudden, the condo market dried up in Miami. This friend of ours' dad was an attorney, and he'd done several of these flips, and so he got stuck with his condo. Now, just so you get a scale of how long a cycle can last, he closed in June of 1982 at $180,000 and sold it for $120 in 1987, 5 years later. And I lived there for 5 years, and I was paying him $600 a month. And when my brother moved out, I was only paying $300 a month till I got a roommate, okay? Because he wanted occupancy. And maintenance, just maintenance was like $400. We haven't talked about maintenance on the house, okay? The roof and all the other stuff that breaks, especially on a $350,000 house that's old. And I remember telling Mr. Mudd, Mr. Mudd, what's terrible is when you were young, it was easy for you guys to buy a house. But it's impossible for young people to do it now. I told him this in 1982, and he said, you're wrong, you gotta make an effort to do it. It took me 5 years to save enough. I saved $8,000, and in 1987, I bought my first house. And it's the best investment I ever made. I bought my first house in Key Biscayne. If I waited till now to buy a house in Key Biscayne, I couldn't afford it. And then that one went up in value. And so when I sold it, I was able to at least buy another house in Key Biscayne because I'd saved a little bit more. And today, a significant percentage of my personal wealth is in the two houses that I own. I over time paid off the debt on them, and so I can just tell you that what is the case in the United States is a case with me, which is it's forced savings. You have to live somewhere, right? And so I did the house. I have a house that I use as my office, so I don't live there. So I've got it set up as a home office, and it's next door to my house, so it's very convenient. It's a really convenient home office. I actually, wake up at 3 in the morning, I run across the alleyway in like my pajama and go to work in my pajama. So anyway, but I actually did the IRR. I bought that one in '93, and if you do the IRR on that, it's only like 7%. It's really not. Now, I bought it for $240 and it's worth whatever now. But I've held it for how many years now? And so the IRR is not great. It's not radically off what the appreciation or return rate should be on single-family homes over a long period of time, which probably shouldn't be more than 6 or 7%. So if home prices are going up 30% every year and wages aren't going up 30%, you're eventually going to run into a problem. And that's the problem we've been having. We've got these huge peaks and valleys and these troughs, and that's when increases go up so high, then they've got to drop significantly because people can't buy at a certain point, or there isn't the credit for people to buy at a certain point. So anyway, so my suggestion is yeah, I think you got to buy. I don't know if today or tomorrow, but you gotta get in the game at some point. At some point, you got to get in the game. Unless you're going to play the game of I'm just going to rent my whole life, and what I save, I'm then going to invest. Not play the market. I'm going to invest. So anyway, so other people had advice for me. I think Jack first, and then you.
Yeah, yes. For me, I think personally, I think it's all depend. I mean, if you're going to buy a house for your family to live, it doesn't really matter how much your house costs. 2 or 3 years from today, because that's where you're going to put your family to live. So I don't think it's a question how you're going to double or triple your money in there, because it's how you're going to live. It's where you're going to live.
No, listen, that's, at the end of the day, that's why residential real estate is different than commercial, because it really corresponds to the hierarchy of needs, right? It's a place, it's your shelter. It's not cash flow. And so, yeah, it's important where you live and the color of the bathroom and the kitchen and all the other things. And what I also know is when you buy a house, it's kind of like this. You know, hopefully you've got a career path that's taking you this way. But the problem is you're only buying at certain points, right? So if you buy a house in your mid to late 20s, you're going to be pushed. But hopefully, as that's going up, you know, you're going to reach another level where now you start having kids or whatever, right? And now you need a bigger house, and it's going to be a reach again until maybe you get the last one, or until you can start saving some money. You keep making more, you know, you keep making more, and you've got fixed payments along the way. But there's always going to be reaches when you buy a house. Hopefully, you're buying while you're ascending, you know, up a corporate ladder somewhere, or up a salary scale somewhere. Oz, you had some thoughts.
I just want, would you ever put a mortgage on your house if you own it?
You could.
I mean, in terms of like taking money out to
It depends on the money.
Yeah, I mean, I've contemplated, because I'm likely going to sell. I don't need this office, you know. I mean, it became an office because I tried to sell it. I bought the other house in 2008, and this thing sat empty for a couple of years. I mean, I knew the market was going to blow up, you know, so it sat empty, and eventually I said, well, you know what, I'll fix it for when I feel like selling it. And I fixed it and just moved my office in there. I've been playing around with the idea of selling it, because I don't really need a 1,600 square foot office, you know, with a 2-car garage or whatever, right? But I've also said, well, I can lever, you know, and that's, I don't teach this class anymore, but why leverage? Yeah, I could borrow against it and then invest, right? Because if I sell a house, what am I going to do with the money? I got to invest it somewhere, right? So my thought was investing it in real estate somehow, but I can get to the same end by borrowing against it and investing that. So that's. But I would tell you, on a personal level, minimize debt. I think your first goal, I see you. Number one, get rid of your credit card debt. Number two, get rid of your mortgage debt. Then you can start investing. And unless there's a home run, I wouldn't borrow against something you've paid off. Me.
So let's just assume like we don't have families or anything, like
Yeah.
offspring or anything, and
Offspring. Okay.
so this is like, if this is a seller's market right now, when would you say the next cycle of being a buyer's market would be? If we're gonna like invest.
I mean, listen, the problem, you never know, you know, whether it's commercial or residential, you never know when the peaks and the valleys are, okay? But there are things that indicate that. So when you start seeing decreased pricing and decreased volume, that starts telling you that the market is going, is going in the right direction for you as a buyer. You may want to see validation of that. You may want to see some uptick in volume and in pricing to sort of validate that, to say, okay, I didn't get the very bottom, but I didn't try to catch a falling knife. Because if volume is falling and pricing is falling, you can grab, but they can still keep going down. So, that's one tactic. You've already seen it. It's gone down 10%. Maybe it works for you. You go in there. But if you really want to see it hit bottom, you've got to see the signs going the other way. Volumes are going up and pricing is going back up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then how would you, has there been any other time in history where we've had so many rental units coming on the market all at once? Like, we have thousands in just Fort Lauderdale.
Well, so, first of all, you've got to differentiate. Real estate is a local business, and so the dynamics in a particular market are going to be different than the dynamics in another market. When we look at data, I try to look at it more on a global or national level to try to at least get some relationships. You then have to overlay that and say, okay, well, the dynamics in Fort Lauderdale might be different. What I would tell you is my personal understanding is that for a long period of time, so let's say from the 60s to now, home ownership rates in this country have typically gone from about 61, 62% up to about 68% and back down into the mid to low 60s, okay? And there was definitely a push in the early 2000s, and I mean, you could argue that there was a lot of politically driven motivation, you know, the Community Lending Act and all this whole sort of shadow banking and Fannie Mae. There was definitely a push by the government to increase home ownership rates. That's been a push for a lot of administrations. That's seen as a sign of wealth. And so my point would be is I don't know that there's a lot in comparison. There's definitely, from 2008 to now, there's definitely been a decrease in home ownership rates, okay? So we peaked out somewhere around 68%. I think we're back down around 63%. I'm giving you numbers that I kind of think are accurate, okay? So there are fewer people owning homes. Well, a lower percentage of people owning homes. So there would be more. Now, is it outrageously more? No. I mean, we haven't seen a change from 60% ownership to only 40% ownership. Now, you may be looking at a submarket that's being overbuilt. Or maybe you're seeing a submarket that has a lot of growth, a lot of influx, and there's a response by the market to address it. Okay, I mean, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I mean, it's just there's a lot of different moving parts to it.
You can't just look at it in the terms of absolute number of units being delivered. I think you need to take a look at it in the perspective of ownership versus rental. And for a long time after the market meltdown in 2008, the only construction that was happening in this country was multifamily, and it's lasted for a lot of years. And logic would have it that in certain markets, maybe over time, it would be overbuilt. And then you're going to have the consequent, just like in the self-storage space, you're going to have the consequent, increase in concessions and decrease in rents. Okay?
Professor.
Yes, sir.
If you have $5 million today,
If you have
$5 million today in cash, would you put it to work today?
If I have cash today,
Yeah.
would I put it to work?
How much cash?
I mean, I'd like you to be honest with me.
It's taking too long, I guess, that means it's not.
No, I mean, look, the answer to your question is, your cash always has to work, okay? At a certain point, your cash is an asset. Your assets have to work for you. That's why you generate assets, right? So, if you own a building, you want to maximize the rents. If what you own is cash, that cash needs to generate more cash. If for no other reason, to preserve its value. And we know because there's inflation, we know that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. Right? Or the $1 tomorrow is going to be worth less than $1 today. So, if for no other reason, that cash has to work to preserve its own value. The question becomes, how much risk do you assume and what's the return expectation of that cash, right? I heard someone say the other day on TV that their portfolio, that they'd raised a bunch of cash. Somebody said, well, what's a whole bunch? And he said, well, we're 15% cash today. The implication of that is that even when you perceive there to be clouds in the horizon, if you're a long-term investor, you should always stay relatively fully invested. Okay, and so to answer your question, I try to keep at this point, I try to keep as little cash as I can on hand. But that doesn't mean that I'm necessarily buying riskier assets. So it's hard to play with real estate. I mean, I continue to stay invested in real estate, and as certain assets that I'm invested in sell, I invest in others. So I mean, I've got a sort of allocation in my mind, and things have opened up where I can do it. in what I trade, what I've definitely done is gone up into the T-bill space a lot. I mean, I've got a lot of short-term, liquid investments and secure investments waiting for valuation of riskier assets to come down a little bit to then, seek a higher return. I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to start,
I have one real question
yes,
on that. On the T-bills, you're talking about the short-term ones where they're paying more, the yield's higher than the longer term. Do you lose in the trading, just the trading cycle?
I try not, what I've done is, so one of the techniques that people, when you're a fixed income investor, there's a variety of different techniques that one can employ. The most common one, when you don't know the direction of rates, and you don't want to you do what's called a ladder. Yeah, I mean, you could do this with T-bills, you could do it with CDs. I mean, I first started doing this years ago with CDs, so I don't know where interest rates are going to go up. I don't know if they're going to go up, I don't know if they're going to go down. I think they're going to go up at some point, but I don't really know. So let's say I've got 1,000. Okay, so one thing that you could do is I buy 100 that matures in January. I buy 100 that matures in February. I buy 100 that matures in March, and so on down the line, right? So I've got 12 maturities coming up. Now what happens in January next year? This matures, and what do?
Reinvest it.
I just come right back here and add it there, and then just keep it circling.
Have you ever done covered call?
Yeah, it's too much brain damage for me. I mean, I know people who do that.
Yes, covered call pretty much is similar.
Supposedly, I mean, that all depends on where the stocks wind up, but, assuming prices stay stable, it does enhance the return profile. You tend to do that with dividend yielding stocks, and it gives you a little, you're collecting the premium on the call you're selling, and so it does juice up the return a little bit, but if stocks move up, you've lost your stock, and you've now lost a potential return, so.
It depends where you sell it to, so pretty much covered.
Where do you buy a treasury bill?
There's two places where you could do that. So you could do that. On a Treasury. The U.S. Department of Treasury has a website where you can go in and create an account and buy them. I use Schwab. They've got a sort of bond store. They didn't used to for a long time. A lot of bonds are persnickety. Bonds are typically more institutional in nature. And so historically, individual investors couldn't really buy bonds. So you would have to buy mutual funds that invested in bonds. But I buy them in Schwab. I just, I'm sure TD and Ameritrade and E-Trade and Fidelity and all that let you do it. So
This stock that you're doing, is that, you have like an automatic setup to do it? Or?
No, I get an email that says, I mean, I track it, but I have an email that says, your bond's maturing or whatever, and then I'm on every day. So when it matures, then I reinvest it. And then there's stuff like an asset I was invested in. I said they sold and I got a distribution, and I'm getting into another investment, but it's like 3 months out. So I just bought a 3-month T-bill to sort of match when it matures. I can then just send it to the real estate. So I use this now as like a place to hold cash. Yes, Brian.
For liquidity, have you ever thought of a no penalty CD?
Yeah, you could. So I used to do this with CDs. The problem is when you start getting into the problem with CDs is unless from a security perspective, CDs now are guaranteed by the FDIC up to $250,000. So unless you're doing them all at one bank, right? If you're doing them all at one bank, then you might get away with like the no penalty because you're a customer of the bank or whatever. But if you're using like the CD supermarket at Schwab or at Fidelity or whatever, most of those CDs are going to have a pretty significant penalty associated with early termination. Because they're sort of institutional. These are banks that are going out and selling millions of dollars worth of CDs, and these guys are making a little commission, and built into the conditions is there's penalties there. So that's where that one trips. And if you do it all in one bank, as long as you got less than the the 250, then you're okay. But then when you start going above that, then it doesn't really work from a security perspective. So yeah, it could work as a proxy, but rates are actually surprising. I was on the finance committee at the yacht club about a year ago, so we're doing this construction, and we had some money in a capital fund that we're using. It's a construction loans funding the hard costs, and all the other costs we're funding out of what we had in the capital reserve. 3-year period, right? And so we're sitting in a meeting, and I said, well, why don't we do a ladder of T-bills? Oh, that's too much brain. Okay, well, let's do CDs. And they're, the problem was that the construction lender, we had to put the money in their bank. So, the risk was that, it was like $2.5 million in one bank. Well, it was a risk the board wanted to assume. They walked into it, they knew it. And so they just did a ladder of CDs. So yeah, you could, but the rates on the T-bills are slightly higher right now. I mean, bips. I mean, I haven't looked in a few months, but the last time I looked, that's why I just started doing T-bills. It was a little bit more. Any other questions on this stuff? Okay. I want to say it now before later. So, because I found this one, and it says the educator must believe in the potential of his pupil, and he must employ all of his art in seeking to bring his pupil to experience his power. Kind of what Bart Starr says, if you work harder, you're going to get further ahead. I played around with the grading. I played around with a bunch of different things. The class today is a watered down version of what I started teaching 10 years ago. I used to have textbooks, and people didn't want to spend money on textbooks, so I got rid of textbooks. There's no reading assignments in the class. And I've even now changed the grading, so it's so heavily weighted on attendance. So it definitely, yes, I'm getting attendance, because I did see I don't believe in that. I don't like that. I don't like that. And frankly, for many years I've refused to allow the class to be filmed. Not because I'm afraid of saying something. It's just I don't want that to be a proxy for coming to class. And then I've noticed, the years a decrease in attendance. Well, all of a sudden I skewed the grade to a point where you really got to come to class to pass it, and people are coming, and that's great. And I reduced the points on the case studies. People get busy. Sometimes you have other things. I got 27 students in this class. I got 6 case studies submitted this week. You guys are missing your opportunity to learn. It's not whether it's worth a point or not. That's not the point. I'm not picking on you, but you brought it up last week. You can't tell who it is, right? It's Armando. No. No, the point isn't whether it's worth a point. The point is whether you learn. And I can't do that for you guys and gals. I can't do that. If you don't put the effort in, it's not whether it's worth a point or not. It's a lot easier for me. It's a lot easier for me to not grade. But that's not the point. I think the point is really to go through the effort. You don't have to read. You got to read the Herald or the Wall Street Journal. That's not an assignment. You should be doing that anyway. See, all you got to do is come to class. And then this case study this week shouldn't have taken more than an hour.
Mm-hmm. Really? I'm like, really?
Give or take.
Good, huh? That's good.
It took me long.
Okay, well, okay, 2 hours. What do you think you should invest as a student in a graduate course? This is a 3-credit graduate course. We meet for 4 hours on Saturday. How many hours of non-classroom time do you think you should invest in this class? In any class, what do you think the standard is?
twice the amount of
Twice the
class
amount of
time?
the class.
At least twice the amount of the class time. So if we have 4 hours of contact time, you as a minimum should be investing 8 hours in preparing for this. There's no reading to do in this class. You got to do a case study. Okay, so the case study was 3 hours. You're still 5 hours below what you should be doing. But you don't do it. So, do I feel bad? Do I feel bad? To some extent, yeah. Because I probably blew the allocation of, I should have incentivized the case studies more. But, really? Some of you haven't turned one in. Not one.
What about like, I mean, next semester, I don't know what everybody's thoughts are, doing one case study over the course of the semester to like really just absorb everything over time, spread out.
I mean, Aaron, the problem is we don't know. I used to teach. There was 1 year, there were 2 years where I taught 3 different classes at a time. So I would have the same students over 3 terms. I did that 2 years. And I didn't even do that, even though I had continuity. But there's definitely some carryover benefit, right? Because you know that you're going to reinforce certain material in another terminal. But what I tried to do in those classes, I would employ, I do different, you know, one class was like really heavy on group work. I don't do any group work in this one, you know. There was another one that was just all sort of working on Instagram. And then there was another one that was, paid bills.
No, T-bills, he's looking at T-bills.
Okay. One was just in class work, like so that, you know, my goal with the modeling class would probably be on, so yeah, I just try to use different techniques. But to say one case study for, I mean, it goes back to, are we investing? Look, I did a master's as an old man. I was already grown. I mean, I decided to do it in a year. I was working. I didn't travel. Traveling's my life. I didn't travel. I didn't miss one class. I didn't miss one class. My habit of getting up at 3 and 4 in the morning started then because I really wanted to do it. I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm better than everyone. No, I'm not trying to say that. I really wanted to do it. I didn't have to do it. I wasn't working anymore. I really wanted the knowledge. A lot of the stuff that I learned in trading and all that, I learned in the program. I wanted it. And because I wanted it, I made the commitment for it. It was a huge personal sacrifice. Now, I don't want to brag. I had a 4.0. I was a valedictorian of the class. And I was the best student according to the teachers, okay? I kicked everybody's ass. I hate to say that. And there were much younger people. Some of them were a lot more intelligent than I was. And definitely a lot closer in applied mathematical abilities. But you know what? They didn't want it as hard. And so, to really get the maximum out of the program, you got to put the effort in. So you want to run a 4-minute mile? How do you do it if you don't, if you don't go out there every day and run a bunch of, 200s or 400s or 800s, right? How do you run a marathon if you don't build up to that distance, right? How do you get on a football field with a helmet and move a 350-pound guy if you don't go to the weight room every day and lift? So, how are we going to kick ass at work if we don't do this stuff? I had a former student sent me a link this week, and to me it was embarrassing. And I said to him, I'm embarrassed as an instructor. He sent me these people that charge you $3,000 to go to one of these seminars and they like pep you all up and all that stuff. So this guy sends me his thing, and it was like this guy was saying, and this guy didn't even sound like a shyster. It was like he sounded like really suave and debonair. He's like, those of you who want to get into real estate investing but don't know how waterfalls work. I mean, he's using all these words that you should learn in the program. If you don't know how to deal with a hedge fund or a private equity group, come to our seminar and we'll show you. And he said, what do you think about this? And he said another student sent it to him. I said, well, shame on us, because I think everything that this guy talked about, we've gone over in the program. Now, you got to reinforce that something. We can't, what we teach in the program, then you got to put into practice. I told this guy's a residential broker. So I said, Your problem is you got all the book knowledge, but now you got to put it to work. And the only way to put it to work is you got to go work for a development business. You got to go work for a Styles or somebody like that. But his lifestyle doesn't permit that. You know, he's already got an income stream. He's already got a business. And so, but you know, you want some. This gives you the knowledge that lets you go into the workplace and then put it to work and apply it. You don't need to go pay $3,000 in Las Vegas to this guy, you know. And I felt them bad. You know, I thought as a teacher, I thought, you know, we haven't done our work. But I just wanted to motivate you guys. You know, at the end of the day, it was a silly case study in a way, but it really brought up a lot of issues. You know. So anyway, let's move on from that so we can cover. I don't want to spend a lot of time on tax. I'm going to talk about tax. Because people always ask me tax questions. I'm not a tax person. I don't purport to be. I didn't study. Tax is a competency underneath accounting that, you know, it's very specific, right? And you've got people that are CPAs that do tax work, and there are people who are attorneys that do tax work, and people who are both. And you can do masters in taxation. You can do graduate level legal work in taxation. Okay, and so it's very intricate. But I at least just want to just touch some topics, so at least you get a flavor for. And I really start by saying that tax is one thing, and financial reporting is a different thing. So everything you've been learning now, talk to financial statements that you produce as a company, or that a company is going to give you, or you're going to give to a lender, or you're going to look online. So we try to report financial results under GAAP and financial condition under GAAP. The U.S. government says you have to report a bunch of financial information to us under our set of rules. It has nothing to do with GAAP. So there's a tax realm and there's a financial reporting realm. And they have nothing to do, one has nothing to do with the other. Now, it may be the case that a lot of smaller businesses only keep records because they've got some sort of tax compliance at the end of the day. So they'll pay an accountant every month to come in and help them put books together, so that accountant at the end of the year, using those books, can do the compliance work that's needed for the U.S. government, right? So you may be a small business, you may not have bank loans, you may not have outside investors, you may not have a need to have financial statements. I would argue that you should always have financial statements so that you know how you're doing, but you may not care. Maybe all you care about is how much cash you have in the bank. That's not the right way to look at your business, but that's the way a lot of small business people look at it, okay? But they'll pay an accountant so that they accumulate data so that it facilitates the compliance with the governments at the end of the year, okay? When I say at the end of the year, it could be along the way as well, because there's a bunch of different layers of taxation, okay? And really, I'd like to share what is a tax? I mean, it's kind of understand, what is a tax? What is a tax?
Dollars collected by the government.
I like to use the word in Spanish, impuesto or impost, you know. What's it in Portuguese, Marina? Let's see if I can get her to say something.
Imposto.
Okay, so imposto, yeah, maybe we'll add a U to it or whatever. Something that's imposed. In Spanish, the word for tax, impuesto, it's an imposition. So it's something that the government imposes on us. So that, now, you can look at it. You can look at it from a very sociological and socialistic perspective and say the government brings this imposition to redistribute wealth, but could also be to collect funds for common services, right? So it's not feasible for each one of us to have our own private police department and fire department and school board and roadway and military. So we're going to collect from everybody to pay for these common services. But then we get into the whole sort of social aspect of it too, and then we collect to make sure everybody has something to eat, everybody has a place to live, etc. Whether we do a good job with that or not, I'll leave that for another day. But taxes are both, they're an imposition both for the payment of collective or the goods and services that are provided on a collective basis, as well as redistribution of wealth. The rules in tax tell you what to do. They tell you what's income and they tell you what's expenses. And they tell you how to recognize income and how to recognize expenses. In GAAP, I've told you in real estate how to recognize revenue, how to account for costs, how to recognize expenses, bless you. In tax, the government tells you. So, what's the easiest rule of thumb? If you collect cash, assume it's going to be considered income. You deposit money into your bank. In fact, the easiest way that an IRS agent comes to audit you is, you say, well, I got this W-2. And the guy's not even going to start there. He's going to say, give me your bank statements. And he's going to add all your deposits into your bank statement. And he's going to say, why isn't this what you declared on your income tax? You say, oh, well, that was a gift, or I found that money, or I went to the track, or whatever, okay? But the sort of basic premise, independent of what the law says, is you can almost assume that if you collect it, it's going to be income. It's going to be deemed income. And the converse is true with expenses. The converse is, unless specifically authorized as a deductible expense, you can pretty much assume that any expense you have is not deductible, unless it is specifically authorized to be deducted. Okay, so for example, things like travel and entertainment, meals, tickets to sporting events and all that have restrictions on whether you can actually deduct them or not. All of us know on a personal level, we used to be able to freely deduct interest on home mortgages, property taxes on residences, but now that's being restricted to some extent. So what we can deduct against income is again also specifically mandated. You know, the tax code lets you use cash or a modified cash or an accrual basis of accounting, but don't be mistaken, that those methods are not GAAP. Okay, they're not GAAP. All right. Tax has rules for everything, and they impact us in real estate. I always try to teach the real estate classes that I've taught under the assumption that we're going to try to live in as frictionless a tax environment as possible. But the most frictionless type tax environment that we can get into is one is where we can eliminate double taxation. Now, what's double taxation? In a normal, so corporation, we know a corporation is its own legal entity, right? It's like its own person, right? So, in this country, typically a corporation, we've done this before, pays tax, right, on its profit. It generates profit. It pays tax. It then distributes what's left after that to its shareholders. The shareholder then also pays tax on the dividend that he receives. Now, what we try to do is we have structures like partnerships, right? General partnerships, LLCs, LLPs, LLLPs, subchapter S, you know, a whole bunch of different sort of disregarded entities, okay, where the entity doesn't pay tax, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that, but it distributes a pro rata share of income and expenses to the shareholders. So there is no double taxation, but that doesn't mean that tax law doesn't impact the income and expenses that are going to be distributed to the shareholder. So, you know, whether it's depreciation, whether it's revenue recognition, whether it's capitalization of expenses, the tax law and how it talks to the different things that we do in real estate are going to impact real estate investors, even if there isn't a double imposition of tax. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. I kind of start. It's kind of interesting the way taxes have kind of overrun our life. I don't know what it is anymore, but does anybody have an idea of how much we work of the year to pay our fair share to the government?
Hours, you mean?
Yeah, you could say, I mean, if there's 2,080 hours in a year, how many hours do we work to feed the government? Or governments?
Depends on the tax rate, so if the tax rate's 28%.
But that's income tax. Well, what about your ad valorem taxes? And what about your sales tax? And what about your social security tax? And what about the excise taxes that you pay? And the franchise taxes that you pay? So, I mean, the last time I looked, it was almost 60% of your year So, till July, till August, you're working for the Englishman. You're working for somebody else. And it's kind of funny, why was this country formed in the first place?
To get away from tax.
We don't want to work for the Englishman. Right, what was that thing? I mean, people think of the Tea Party as like this modern day, what's the ultra right-wing movement or whatever, but what did the Tea Party stand for? What did it say? Taxed enough already is what people, but what was, I mean, it was kind of modeled after the Boston Tea Party, which ultimately was a revolt saying, we don't want to pay your tax. And in the case of income taxes, so that's one of the basic tenets of this country was the federal government was not going to collect income taxes. Do we know when we started paying income taxes? Because you just told me that the marginal tax rate, so the lowest marginal tax rate in this country is, once you make over $9,000 a year, you're paying 12% of your income. And on the margin, once you're making over 500,000, you're paying 38%. But that's just to the government. So, when did we start paying taxes?
Was it the New Deal?
Was it 30s? New Deal?
No, I had to have heard before that.
So it's the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So you know all these are like what 26 amendments to the U.S. Constitution.
That's after that followed the Civil War, so the
1913.
Yeah.
Woodrow Wilson. 1913. A bunch of stuff happened like 1913. Federal Reserve was founded in that year. So a lot of stuff was happening in the world, right? World War I was about to break out. There was all these sort of, so there was the industrialization, and what followed industrialization was all the sort of socialist movements and worker movements to protect, there were monopolies, and in order to break up of the monopolies, a lot of stuff was going on. We had problems with banks. J.P. Morgan, the man, and his bank, and a bunch of other people stepped in to prevent a collapse, and so we created a Federal Reserve. We'd never had a Federal Reserve Bank in this country until 1913. But in 1913, we passed the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and it gave the government the right to lay and collect taxes on its people. And now we pay up to 40% to the federal government. Now, how does that work? All three branches, I will tell you, all three branches of the government essentially deal with taxation. So you've got a legislative branch. So there's three branches of government in this country, right? The legislative branch enacts the law. The executive branch essentially administers it, right? And the legislative branch, I mean, you could say enforces it, or it applies it, right? Or interprets the law, right? So,
that's a judiciary.
The judiciary. I'm sorry, the judiciary. And so, you enact legislation. The Department of Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, which is a department of the Department of Treasury, enforces it basically, and then there's tax court, and then there's also the normal court of appeals, and you can follow tax law on either. There's sometimes you're gonna file appeals under a tax court because there's the presumption that there's more advantageous rulings there, and sometimes you just go through your normal federal appeals court process. We have a tax code in this country, so the 16th Amendment creates or gives the government the right to collect taxes. A bunch of acts, immediately the government starts, we're here to help, give us money so we can help you. Sorry for all the federal workers here, right? And then that all goes up until 1939. And then in 1939, the first Internal Revenue Code is created. And so under Title 26, all these acts sort of get codified as the Internal Revenue Act. That was modified in 1954, and it was modified again in 1986. But now we are in 2019, and it's a cluster because the last time the act was modified was in 1986, and these are just modifications to, so basically you just have 100 years, 100 plus years of different attempts by different people at different times to either capture funds or motivate some sort of activity or behavior, or restrict some sort of activity or behavior, right? Because the tax code at the end of the day is like the stick, right? It's like, okay, if you do this, we're gonna hit you, or if you don't do that, we're gonna give you this carrot, okay? Or the other way around, if you do this, we're gonna give you this carrot, if you don't do it, we're gonna hit you, okay? But it's a cluster, okay? And it gets a lot more complicated than that, because the Constitution, so in the original Constitution, the federal government did not have the right to assess taxes on income, right? But state and municipal governments had those rights. So the Constitution basically tells us what's under the purview of each different layer of government that we have, okay? And so, well, it wasn't until 1913 that this amendment let the government collect income taxes. There were other taxes, you know, franchise taxes, et cetera, that it was collecting. But states then had the right. What are the biggest states? What are the biggest revenue sources for states? What are the taxes?
Property tax? Or sales tax?
In most states, well, I shouldn't say in most states. In a lot of states, sales taxes are important. In Florida, it's very important. What other taxes? In a lot of states, I think there's 45 states that have income taxes, personal income taxes. What other taxes do states collect?
Gas tax?
So there would be excise taxes or franchise taxes that are paid on things like utilities, so gasoline, natural gas, electricity, phone bills, things like that. What other taxes do states collect?
Transportation?
Those are probably more here.
Gas tax?
We just kind of said that, so there's like some sort of like excise taxes or franchise taxes.
Is it tax, like hotel tax?
Yeah,
Hotel occupancy tax.
Probably more down here. Definitely intangible taxes here. So intangible property tax. What's intangible property? Things like stocks, bonds, things like that.
So they tax the income under the, like the capital gains kind of thing?
No, so like if you own, in certain, I mean, Florida used to have this, if you own stocks, you pay a certain percent on
Like
the value of that. It's like a wealth tax.
Huh.
Well, but you've got a personal property tax here at this level. So, I mean, a lot of these things impact real estate, by the way. Now, what other state taxes might you, you might have some payroll taxes here. Definitely, you've got some unemployment compensation taxes here.
What's the difference between a payroll tax and an income tax?
Payroll is for the employer.
Okay, so, a payroll tax could be like what the Social Security Administration would charge. And so there's two levels to, so when you get paid, your father pays you? I'm gonna have a word with him. When your father pays you, say he pays you $1,000, how much do you pay Social Security?
Or percentages.
What percentage?
I
I just said it a little while ago.
Yeah, whatever you said.
Whatever. 7.65%, I think. Okay, so the employee pays that, but the employer pays a matching amount. So that's a payroll tax that the employer has to pay. Now, the employer also has to pay into an unemployment fund, which is typically at a state level. There's also a federal unemployment tax, by the way. So you've got payroll taxes up here, and you've got unemployment tax here. So that you file a 941 and you file a 940. 941 for payroll taxes, 940 for unemployment taxes. Yes, Brian?
Does that unemployment tax decrease as the jobs market gets better?
No, it's typically based on, so the federal one, unless that's changed, is a fixed amount. The state is based on your history. So you have have you ever heard like companies a lot of times like they'll fight you if you file for unemployment? Have you ever heard of that? So what happens is every company has a rating based upon their history. And so it's typically based on whatever, on a reduced amount. So in Florida it was like $6,000 or $7,000 the last time I got involved with this stuff. But it's based on a personal factor that you have. So there's a minimum, and then based on what your history is, you pay more or you pay less. So there's a kind of a reward for that. What municipal level taxes do we have? What's the biggest one? Property taxes, property ad valorem taxes on but, so you've got real property taxes and you've got personal property taxes. So if you're a company and you pay a tax every year on your assets, not just on your real estate, but you pay on your taxes as well. Those go to local government. What other local governments? You were talking about hotel. There's a lot of hotel, and you've also got franchise taxes, okay? What else? Transportation, there may be
That's the one I
So
said.
there may be additions to sales taxes that are applicable to things like healthcare, transportation, okay?
If you run a car at the airport, you have to actually pay like an extra tax for.
Yeah, so people are gonna hit tourists because they're like, they don't vote for you. So you just kinda, you got no choice, right? Go to New York City and pay a hotel bill. I'm going to New York this week, but I'm staying in a college dorm. I really am, by the way, so that's fun. I have a board retreat at Fordham, and I'm on the board, and so we're staying on campus.
A novel.
A novel, exactly. Yeah, I think the dorms are a little different than when I was there. I think they have like air conditioning and stuff now. Yes, Brian?
Utilities?
Yeah, so there could be some franchise taxes that are paid both at a state and a municipal level on utilities, phone bills.
What about like parks? Is there any like anything for parks? and
So
rec?
there are, well, so services at a local level may be paid up front with impact fees or by direct contributions to the creation of them. But typically, you have what are called enterprise funds. So municipal governments, I don't want to get into fund accounting at municipal levels, but municipal entities have enterprise funds, which are entities that are essentially profit-making or business-type entities within a local government. So, for example, the Parks and Recreation in Dade County owns 7 marinas, 5 golf courses. Those are essentially for-profit ventures, okay? The FDX runs a bunch of toll roads. So those are all into enterprise funds, so they're collecting fees from users to offset the expenses. Yes, Anthony?
So where would police, firemen, etc. go in? Would that be
So those
state
typically are part of your property taxes. So your property taxes typically are going to pay for in Florida we have unified school districts. So the school districts are by county, and there is a component of your property tax that goes to fund the school board. There's a component of your property tax that goes to pay fire, police, library, you know.
Cable TV, I feel like I see some extra tax on my TV.
You have, on cable TV, you're going to get some of these franchise taxes that would be municipal or might be state. So, I mean, we could spend all day going up, through this, but where I'm going to all of this is, in addition to income taxes, there's a series of taxes, especially at a state and local level, that impact real estate. Whether it's directly through an ad valorem tax on a real property, but it could be, if you're a property owner and you're providing utilities to your tenants, you're getting taxed on all those, okay? And you're getting taxed on, to the extent that you've got some personal property, you've got a property management office and it's got equipment, you gotta pay for that. To the extent you've got employees that are servicing a property, you're going to be paying payroll taxes, and you're going to be contributing into an unemployment fund, okay? And then, while you may not directly be responsible you're responsible for collecting sales tax on leases, okay? Yes, Anthony?
So I know you're not a tax person, so this is more of a general question, but would the taxes, let's say if you're paying for the utilities for your tenant, would that be something that you could deduct in your personal, not your personal, but in your business taxes, that you're paying those taxes for the utilities, or no?
So, in your utility bill, so typically what I'm going to tell you is utility bills, for example, any property operating or maintenance expense is gonna be deductible against rents. So to the extent there's a component in that that's a tax, yeah, it's gonna be fully deductible, okay? I mean, as long as it's a justifiable and necessary business expense or expense of generating that income, you're gonna be able to deduct it, okay?
You said against rents, what is that?
Well, rents would be your income, right?
Okay, I see.
So if you're a
I see.
property
So
owner,
reduce
what's your
it.
revenue? Rents,
Yeah.
right?
Reduce by the tax.
And so, you know, your P and L,
Yeah, I see.
so you know, for tax purposes, you're gonna have, so, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but, so if you're an individual, you typically file what's called a 1040, right? Is that what you guys file at the end of the year?
Yeah.
Yes? No?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
somebody the other day, I do I do a bunch of volunteer work, but somebody asked me for a 1099 from like 5 years ago. And I said, what's the problem, Andre? And he's like, oh, my wife hasn't filed tax returns in like 6 years, and she's like a finance person. So maybe not everybody knows what a 1040 is, okay? So there's a corporate equivalent. If you are a C Corp, what is a C Corp? That's just a traditional, normal corporation, okay? You file, do you know what form you file? An 1120. Okay, and so, you know, what does this have? Like your salaries, and what, you know, capital gains, blah, blah, blah. What do you offset against it? Your medical expenses, maybe some educational, maybe some child care, some educational, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the law says is income, you declare as income, and whatever the law says is an expense, you declare as an expense. Well, what do you think if you're a real estate operator and you're 1120, what are you going to declare as income? Like the rent you collect, right? If you're a home builder, what do you think you're going to have? The sales, right? And what are you going to deduct from this stuff?
Everything.
No, not everything. You're going to deduct whatever the law says you can deduct, which are typically justifiable, you know, just and necessary expenses associated. So if you're an operator of just, you know, multifamily assets, you know, any operating expense associated with maintaining that, property taxes, insurance, you know, utilities, whatever, are all going to be deductible. If you're a home builder, what are you going to deduct against that? Your cost of sales, right? The cost of construction, cost of marketing, etc. Okay? So if you are, but we said most companies are not C Corps in the real estate space. We tend to use LLCs and partnerships and things like that. What tax form do they file?
It's passed through, isn't that passed through?
Yeah, they're pass-through entities. So they file what's called a 1065 typically. Okay? And what that does is it basically accumulates the pro rata share of all these individuals. If we have 10 partners and we made $1 million, then each partner, that K1, that 1065 spawns off 10 K1 forms. Right? Partner 1, partner 2, partner 3, and so on. And each partner then is going to get $100,000 of income. And then that partner is going to put it on his individual 1040. So this entity does not pay tax, but the individual that is that's a partner in that partnership pays the tax. Does that make sense?
Or carry through the loss towards it.
Well, loss is subject to limitations. I mean, so for example, investment losses are capped at how much per year?
I don't know.
$3,000.
Really?
Yeah. Now you can carry them forward.
Each year, for only $3,000 a year.
That's it.
So why?
But
is
if you
there
have
so
gains, because that's what the law says.
Why is there so much talk about carried forward losses?
Well, because then you can carry them forward. If you don't use them,
3,000
years. I think it's.
so I mean, I hate to tell you, I've carried losses over sometimes for a few years.
So if you say you have $9,000 worth of losses, you can deduct 3 this year.
And then six the next year, or the year after, I forget, I think carry them over like 15 years. Or, is it 5? I don't know, it used to be a long.
But you can eventually.
You hopefully have gains. because if you keep having losses, you're not gonna be
the
around.
business.
You have a hobby.
And then you're not good, so, yeah, so, and then, and then what happens with real estate a lot, I mean, I don't wanna get into the sort of hype, what happens with, real estate is a capital intensive business, right? We buy buildings. What do buildings spawn?
Little buildings, I don't know.
Offspring.
Depreciation.
Right.
Depreciation. What's depreciation? It's a recapture of the cost of the building every year. So we write off a portion of the cost of the building every year, right?
That's the line.
And so, what happens in a lot of real estate ventures is you wind up with a loss for book purposes, which may not be a cash loss. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're cash flow positive, but you have a tax loss. Now, what that means is for a lot of investors in real estate is that you wind up with cash distributions and a tax loss. And that's kind of the best of all worlds, because the cash distribution is deemed to be a return of capital and not taxable. The problem is if you're a passive investor, you're not actively involved in the day-to-day management of the business, you cannot deduct that loss. Okay? So just,
How's that determined? I mean,
it's very simple. I mean, you're either actively involved in managing the business or not. You're a limited partner. What's the difference between a general partner and a limited partner? Liability. Who has liability?
The dual partner.
Okay, so typically a limited partner has no liability, right? And then a general partner is going to assume all the liability, right? So if you're a limited partner, almost by definition, you're not actively involved in the business, it's going to be a passive loss.
So how would that happen in like an equity, so let's say like we have a property and on the property appraiser it's a limited partnership, but then there's other people involved and they're listed as like an LLC.
Yeah, well, it could keep coming. So like, you could just have a whole bunch of different layers, right? So you could have an LLC, right? And it has, let's just say, 3 members. One member, the managing member, let's say, is a person, right? A physical person, right? Okay, so that person gets a K1, and then he puts that on his 1040, on his personal return. But you could have here, another LLC. So that LLC has an obligation to send a K1 to every one of their partners, and so on until it ultimately gets to an individual who has to put it on his 1040. So you may have a bunch of disregarded entities along the way, but there's ultimately a physical person that owns that. Nate, you had a question?
no, just stretch on, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, this could be, it's a whole master's program, yes, Ryan?
So, a way to kind of reinvest the profits into the business to avoid the tax liability, is that kind of what I think of. Like Amazon didn't show profitability until the 2000s. At the same time, they're generating free cash flow and able to reinvest it. Is that a tax advantageous? Do you kind of understand what I'm saying?
I don't know that Amazon wasn't profitable till 2000. I think they weren't profitable till well after that.
Yep.
2000.
But 2000,
I think Amazon was having like real operating losses. I mean, they were just, similar. Let's use Tesla as an example today. It's a company that Uber, companies that are acquiring market share by essentially selling a product below what a profitable level is. I wouldn't have. I don't think that Amazon had quote free cash flow from operations, and then, so let's.
infrastructure
Amazon
costs.
probably about 2003, 2004.
While they were not profitable, they were still growing without free cash flow.
But that's different. Let's. I haven't talked to you about what accountants call the statement of cash flows much. I've talked to you about a balance sheet, and I've talked to you about an income statement. accountants have a third report in their financial statements, which is a statement of cash flows. And what we really ultimately try to endeavor is to get to a justification that says ending cash balance, okay, opening cash balance, and then we've got net changes in cash from a business. Now, this all starts essentially from net income, right?
Yeah.
So what do we add back to that? We add back, what's the easiest add back to that? Non-cash expenses, so depreciation and amortization, right?
Yeah.
So you can kind of say cash flow from operations, right, should justify where your increases in cash come in. But the reality is there's a lot of activities, and we talk about two things. We talk about what we call financing, and we talk about investing activities, and then we also talk about changes in working capital. So I could spend a whole class on this, right? But basically, you could, for example, generate cash by accelerating your collection period on your receivables. Or you can generate cash by pushing back your payment on your payables. You can also generate cash by borrowing money. You can lose cash by paying back debt.
Yeah.
You can generate cash by selling assets, right? Or you can lose cash by making investments. So, I mean, I don't know, I'm not an expert in Amazon, but I can tell you, Amazon wasn't surviving because of this. They were somewhere here, they were living. It might have been issuances of stock, it might have been issuances of debt, it might have been borrowings, it might have been drawdowns on working capital lines, okay? I mean, that's where Tesla's been. Let's look at Tesla.
Yeah.
Tesla doesn't make money here, so how do they survive?
By
They don't have assets to sell, so what do they?
Another round of funding.
Yeah, just borrowing money, just keep increasing the capital stock. Okay? Because ultimately, you need cash to pay your bills.
Yeah.
Okay? You can extend your vendors, you can hold off paying. You can go from paying in 30 days to paying in 90 and you just picked up a bunch of money. You can try to collect, you can try to squeeze your clients to collect quicker, but these guys are going to, you know, expanding the capital stock a little bit, so.
And what are the is there any tax implications of having investing income rather than financing rather than operational? Is there any difference from a company's perspective of generating money in those different?
I mean, only to the extent that there might be differences in the way the tax law requires you to report them, but, you know, in the long run, income is going to be taxed. So it's not going to really matter. So you might have some advantages in reporting some investment income. How? You sell something and you've got the ability to recognize it under an installment basis of account, you know, or installment basis for tax purposes. So as you collect it, you're recognizing profit, and maybe GAAP lets you recognize it all in one shot. But for the most part, in the long run, there's not going to be any difference. You're going to recognize the income that you collect. Okay. Just a couple of other things. Yeah. So you've got the same sort of, you know, layers of government at a state and a municipal level. So there's a legislative branch. State legislatures will impose taxes, right? There'll be some sort of enforcement agency. In Florida, that's the Department of Revenue. Their agents will enforce. And there's a state judicial system. So if you've got an issue with interpretation, you can always go to the judiciary, to the state judiciary, right? You should always try. You've got different layers of guidance, right? So say, how do I make tax determinations? Well, the easiest thing is that the code tells you what to do. Something, you know, the code's going to say salaries are taxable. But there's a lot of stuff that's gray areas. So then you get into these whole sort of level 1 or level 2 guidance. So things like specific tax court rulings or revenue rulings are going to trump, you know, maybe interpretations by a lower court, for example. You know, so my only point is when you make determinations on tax returns, you should always be grounded in some level of knowledge, right? So, okay, I deducted that. Why? Because I felt like it. Well, because I didn't want to pay as much taxes. No, I can tell you that it sounds a lot more intelligent to say, in subsection whatever, you know, or this ruling in this appeals court gives me enough justification to think that my situation is similar enough, right, so that maybe you wind up with just paying penalties for paying late, but you only have late fees and not penalties for just obviating the law, okay? Or just, you know, like outright not declaring income, all right? There's a bunch of different, you don't need to memorize these things, there's a bunch of different sections of the code that impact real estate. 1031 we've talked about, like-kind exchanges, right? So the deferral. 1033s we've talked about, which is eminent domain, which is again a deferral of the gains. And you get into these, the 1200s, so I got 1231 is any asset used in a trade or business, including buildings. So there's rules under 1231 that, for example, if you use accelerated depreciation, you've got to recapture it at the time of a sale. You don't even know these things, but I'm just sort of, then you've got, so 1250 deals with real property, all right, which has never been personal property. 1245 is personal property that's never been real property. It's kind of got to look at, that's the building, and this is all the sort of stuff, you know, the escalators and the elevators inside the building, and, you know, air conditioning units on the roof and stuff like that, okay? So, you know, the code's going to tell you how to do stuff like 741 deals with gains and losses on partnership interest. 167 deals with depreciation. Okay, 856 deals with REITs. So there's a whole bunch of, but again, what's my advice to you?
To be bonded.
Hire, no, not be bonded, hire a good consultant, you know, hire a good tax attorney, okay? No Google. Now, what I would say is, no, but what I would say is, along those lines, my experience has been, the IRS website is very valuable. They've got good reference material, they've got good information. And if you call them, sometimes you actually get somebody that's very knowledgeable on the phone that can help you out, okay?
After like 9 hours.
If you call on April 14th, it's the wrong time. I bet you if you call today, you might actually get, you know, there are people that are very competent, okay? Two quick things and we'll take a break. REITs, we've talked about REITs. REITs are, in a way, they're not pass-through entities, but they don't pay tax, okay? As long as they comply with all the rules, we've talked about that. They've got to distribute 90% of their of their net income to shareholders. And it has to be passive income. Now, REITs can undertake some development activity, and they're limited, I think, up to 15% of their assets can be in what are called TRSs, which are taxable REIT subsidiaries. So a REIT can actually have taxable activities as long as they're embedded within a taxable REIT subsidiary that pays tax, and that taxable REIT subsidiary can only be up to a certain amount. I think it's 15% of the assets of the REIT, and there's other limitations on that, okay? Another one that's important, we'll talk about consolidation later, when the consolidation threshold is 80%. So if you are company A and you own 80% of company B, you file a consolidated tax return for both entities. Company B does not file a tax return. If company A owns 50% of company B, okay, company B files a tax return and company A files a tax return. So the threshold for consolidation for tax purposes is 80%. It's different for under GAAP. We'll talk about that in a little bit, okay? So that's that. James.
Go back. No, like literally. All right. So if one company owns 80%, 80% is the threshold, but then what did you just say about A and B only 50% each?
So no. If A only owns 50% of B, then B files its own tax return and A files its own tax return. It doesn't file a consolidated return.
But at 60,
At 60, it's the same thing.
same thing, okay.
B files its own return and A files its own return.
That's
The
79.
threshold
Okay.
is.
We talked about this before, capital gains is only relevant for personal income taxes. That concept doesn't exist for corporations. I get this question a lot, so I'll throw it in there. Capital gains on home sales. If you're an individual, you have a one-time exclusion up to $250,000 of gain that is not taxable on the sale of a house. That's gone through a bunch of different things. So if you sell a house, your first $250,000 worth of gain, $500,000 if you file married, are excluded. The only thing I would say is the following. These are, record retention. Record retention. You need to maintain, the burden of proof is on you. So, you file tax returns, the burden on you is to be able to justify why you took certain positions and to be able to provide supporting documentation. So you typically need to maintain, for individual, you've got 3-year period that you've got to maintain records, corporate 5, but you need to keep stuff that carries over. So if you buy a house, you should keep all the information from that until you sell it, and then 3 years after that. Okay? Corporate 5, I try to keep 5 personal and 7 corporate, just to be safe. Okay? My advice is, don't mess with the IRS or with the Department of Revenue or anybody else. It's a lot better to pay your tax and sleep well at night than it is to always be concerned with whether you did the right thing or not. Because I can tell you, the level of taxation audit in this country is very low, but there's nothing more embarrassing than getting called in and having taken some ridiculous postures and having to be embarrassed by not having done the right thing. We'll get back up when it hits 8, so like in 7 minutes we'll keep going, okay?
It's nice, so you don't have any class. What? My brother? Every Saturday?
Yeah.
Not much. So you're from here? Are you from?
I'm born and raised, yeah. Born and raised. Plantation in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool. And what do you study? Is this, or what did you study before this?
I went to college in Boston. Played football all 4 years in finance and accounting.
Where would you go to school in Boston?
Bentley?
Oh, I went to Bentley.
You know Bentley or no?
Yeah,
it's a
of
small
course.
school. So
yeah, it's a small school. It's a good school.
Yeah, it's
from
really,
what I understand.
I try to play football. And one of the best school I get into. So Georgetown on my list.
Georgetown.
Got deferred, and Bentley was my fallback.
Yeah.
Try to get out of the state and pay too much money for school, like an idiot. So.
I applied to one school and I got in, so I went there. Went to NYU.
Oh, it's awesome. You get that one, you? I lived in Murray Hill for a year after college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I was there all 4 years.
I miss the city so much.
It's nice. I mean, it's different because I'm from Miami, so
yeah.
for me, moving to my job, I'm really good with cold weather, but I'm from Florida, so you're from here, right?
Yeah.
So you understand that it's been summer for the last 25 years.
It hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed, right? So growing up in New York, at least I had 4 seasons, it was nice, but then I moved back here because I couldn't find a job over there.
I lived in Murray Hill on my friend's couch, and I ended up starting paying rent like 6 months after, and couldn't find a job during the recession.
Yeah.
I graduated college 2010, and
Oh, you did, I graduated in 2013.
yeah, I was literally just
You're in the middle of it.
applying jobs with guys with 30 years experience who got fired from their old jobs, so.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah, I couldn't find a job that was, I was finding jobs that I was qualified for, but they were paying me, I wanna say almost 33% less than they should have been paying me.
Yeah.
So I couldn't find anything worth, because if I took the job, I'd be living in the subway.
Oh, terrible.
I would be like,
Yeah.
fuck this, like, I'm not gonna be
That's
living
why
like this.
I
So I
this
moved,
couch, so.
yeah, I moved back here and I'm being paid twice that and I'm living much better.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What's that long? Alright, I'm gonna just eat some stuff.
Yeah, do you think?
So I have to go to that.
What time is that meeting?
It's a reception at night.
Okay, okay.
So if you guys end up going Wednesday night, I'll definitely join you. If not, I'll just.
Yeah, I'm fine with either or personally, but,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll check with Ryan, or you can ask
Yeah, we'll
Ryan.
get together.
Yeah, we'll definitely like hang out when we're there, for sure, so. It's exciting, though. I'm excited.
It's a lot of fun.
Did you sign up for the mobile tour?
No.
Okay, because we signed up for, the Disney one, so I'm excited about that one. Also because it started at 9:30 versus 8, so we were like, we're gonna get some extra sleep, but,
No, you'll be exhausted afterwards. Like,
yeah. Okay, so you did it before in the past?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's an information overload.
Oh, it
Because we
is.
start at like 7 and it's back to back.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's fun.
okay.
You'll enjoy it.
I'll have to start drinking coffee again, I guess.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Just for a day. I don't like coffee, gives me headaches really quickly, so.
You'll need it though.
You ever tried matcha green tea?
I
No,
drink
I
coffee.
haven't.
I drink it every morning.
Okay.
Oh, I love it.
Cause I tried I usually get, Lipton, just basic Lipton, but the decaffeinated one, but not.
I think it's because you're actually consuming the whole green, because
Okay.
it's like a powder,
Send
right?
that to me then.
Okay, well, I'll do it when I get home. I think I sent it to Anthony, didn't I send you a picture of it?
It's way back in my message.
He also,
Yeah, that was a long time ago. It's really, put it this way, when I don't drink it, I feel tired during the day. I've been drinking it now for like
But
4
it doesn't
years.
make you like feel wired either, right?
For some people it does,
Except
but I've been
for-
drinking it so long that I'm like,
I'm worried.
my boyfriend calls it green crack. He was like, oh my God, you gave me some, it's green tea. Is it, it's so, I don't know, because he was talking nonstop after he took it.
So I guess I'm looking for the unit being
But
locked
I
up.
drink it every morning with honey.
Oh, wait, what, no, wait for the last one.
Yeah, those are pretty good though.
Green tea.
I don't know, there's obviously a difference, I don't know what the difference
Oh, you did
between
the
things
quasi.
are, okay?
Probably easier.
I mean, the only thing that I would tell you is when you start looking at spreads of like 3 bids, 4 bids, or whatever, convenience is important. And what you don't want is to have, I want to have X here and so much here and so, because you don't have time to be running around. So you just got, at a certain point, it's more convenient to have everything in one place.
Yeah.
So they're saying like, so like these CD supermarkets at like Fidelity and E-Trade and all this have is, you can obviate the risk factor of having CDs. You could hold CDs from a bunch of different banks in one place without having to go and drive to all these places. Or Or have an account at Goldman, have an account here, have an account at this bank. So, I don't know what the differences are, but I would also tell you that the caution is to whether, making another 2 or 3 bits really matters that much for what the cost of the inconvenience is also. Does that make sense? Is this at the site where you can buy them? Or these are Treasury Markets? Or is this the place where you can buy them? No, there's a place with it, like, you gotta do a search for it. Not in class, not during class.
It was quick.
Don't assume.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So they hit my milestone.
Graduation.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, we're gonna start. Yeah, graduation from the program? Well, now you gotta pass this class.
Like, how can they allow that? Don't they only graduate? I think it's bad.
I don't think we've ever had that problem that people. Okay, class, we're ready to start. I'm ready to start. So if guys, some of you who are the biggest culprits aren't in the room right now, but I can't have people, it's very distracting, and I can see you when you're on your phones. It's very distracting, it's very, very distracting. So, please, I don't want to have to stop class and call you guys out. Put the phones away, please, thank you. Okay, I already kind of said this, okay? Please put the phones away. I already said that. That's all I'm going to say, okay?
Do you have somebody going to talk first today? Or some like fancy looking guy?
Maybe he charges $3,000 for a call. Oh, that's the guy from Las Vegas.
Oh, what's it?
I have no idea. I don't know who it is. Maybe maybe Dr. Forgy fired me. Maybe I got my pink
After
slip.
11 years, I don't know.
Maybe I got my pink slip, I have no idea. No, I don't. If I wasn't here, someone was gonna come in, but since I'm here, no one's gonna come in
Jim
today.
Wood.
But that person may come in another day anyway, so.
Academic advisor type of.
As I've already, those of you who come late can't disrupt the class, please.
He was answering, I don't know who it was. Who was sorry?
It's an academic. So you're good, you still.
I guess I still have a job. Okay. I mentioned we own real estate in a variety of different ways, and the way the businesses operate and the capital that's required really lends itself to people coming together and pooling capital together, which creates a financial reporting complexity for us, right? Because if I own 100% of an entity, I can pretty much say that I can identify 100, or that entity can identify 100% with me, right? I can say, if you're my son, right? If you're my daughter, you're part of my family, right? But if all of a sudden, I own 10%, I mean, how do you own 10% of a child, Or how do you own 25% of it? Maybe you own 50% of a child, but not 25%. So it starts becoming a little bit more complex when you don't own 100% of something, okay? And so there's accounting literature that, you know, has to deal with it, and things have become very complex, and every day, you know, and we kind of went through the paradigm, the more regulation that we have, the more innovation that we have, and so that innovation gives rise to, so people are trying to obviate the regulation, and so that gives rise to people, you know, coming up with new ways to do things, which means you got to come up with new regulations, okay? And so, you know, it gets a little bit complicated. I've got a very little simple sort of chart here that's ultimately going to get to where we're going to go. I'll give you a little bit more background, maybe not a lot more than I typically would, but the principles of consolidation in accounting ultimately go back, this is very static stuff, this hasn't changed. I mentioned early on that in the 1950s there was an attempt to, sort of first codification attempt at all the accounting literature. So ARB 51 in 1958 comes up with what are essentially the principles of consolidation. And very simply, it tells you that all majority-owned subsidiaries, i.e. all entities in which a parent has a controlling financial interest through direct or indirect ownership of a majority voting interest, shall be consolidated. It doesn't say it may be consolidated. It says it must be consolidated. I'm going to repeat that again. All entities in which a parent has a controlling financial interest through direct or indirect ownership of a majority voting interest shall be consolidated. Okay, now, that sounds good, but why would you want to consolidate something, or why would we not want to consolidate something? Yes?
The double taxation.
This has nothing to do with taxation. GAAP is one thing. We forgot tax already.
Oh, I was still on that.
Liability, you wouldn't want to consolidate because.
You may not want to show everybody all the debts that you have, right? So you may want to put a bunch of losses or, you know, or liabilities in one subsidiary and then not show it, right? That may be one reason why you don't want to do it. But looked at in a positive way, you know, and I think one of you said it in one class, right? If I'm a developer and I want to go to a bank, you know, I want to show the bank everything of who I am. I want to show them my worth. I want to show them what my sponsorship capacity is, right? And so, basically, the accounting literature says you don't really have a choice. You have to reflect the financial reality of all the ownership interests that you have. And said very simply, it says if you have, to your point, if you have direct or indirect ownership of a majority voting interest in a company, you must consolidate it. Now, how do we define that? I'm going to use 50% as a threshold for that. Okay? I'll come back to that in a second. But remember I said in tax, the threshold for consolidation was 80%. For GAAP, it's 50%. Okay, we're going to come back to what does consolidation mean and all that. But before that, I talked about regulation and innovation and why people may want to do some certain things or not do certain things. So the rule's very simple. If you own more than 50% of a subsidiary, you got to consolidate it. Oz just told us some people may not want to consolidate things because maybe they've got losses there, right? Maybe they've got debt they don't want to reflect. Who's heard of Enron?
Everybody.
We've heard about Enron, and we've talked about Enron a little bit. Enron created a bunch of things which I'm going to define under FIN 46, they're defined as VIEs. Financial Interpretation Number 46 created a definition for something which they call a VIE. And a VIE is a variable interest entity. What's a variable interest entity? A variable interest entity is an entity, what's the word? In which, okay, so here are the three rules, okay? If an entity does not have sufficient equity at risk, less than sufficient equity, okay? If the shareholders do not have the typical characteristics do not have the typical characteristics of shareholders, right? They can't absorb the risk, right? And if the voting rights are not proportional to ownership. Are not proportional to ownership. So what does that mean? What does that mean? So let's think of Enron. So maybe the CFO was a guy named Andy Fastow, and then maybe Andy Fastow's wife, who was an accounting manager, might have owned nominally or figuratively 98% of an entity. But she didn't have the rights to its profits. She didn't have the capacity to absorb the losses. Enron was guaranteeing all of the debt, right? She didn't have the right to vote. She just owned it. That was a variable interest entity. And that's one of the things Enron would do. They created a series of entities in which related parties owned the ownership interest. And even though they looked like they were the owners, they didn't have the attributes that would typically be ascribed to ownership interests, right? They couldn't absorb the losses, they didn't have rights to the benefits, they couldn't vote their shares, okay? So they were creating the illusion that these entities were not related to Enron, when in fact, they were related to Enron. And what was Enron doing with these things? Well, these entities would enter into transactions that would maybe offset some of the costs and expenses that Enron should have borne. They might have been issuing some of the debt and then funneling it back in a less than debt relationship back to Enron, right? And so they were creating the illusion that they were telling the public, this is Enron, okay, with all of our subsidiaries, and it had all the good stuff and all the bad stuff was sitting in these entities that, because Enron didn't own 50% of the stock, it wasn't consolidating it. But the reality was the substance, not the form, but the substance of the transaction was that they really owned it. Okay? And so what FIN 46 says is before we even contemplate any of this stuff, you got to identify if a subsidiary is a variable interest entity. If it is a variable interest entity, you must consolidate it irrespective of how much you own. So if Enron or McDonald's has an entity that they don't own any percentage of, or they own a very limited percentage of, but it fits these attributes, they got to consolidate it. Okay, I had a bunch of questions, so start here and then we'll work back.
All right, who would own the other majority of those?
These were owned by all these variables were owned by related parties, people that were friends of, like the wife of the CFO, the son of the CEO, just people that they were straw men. That's the word, right? People that were just set up to make it look like they own these entities.
But wouldn't they have to pay taxes on that entity as well?
Well, these entities were losing money. Plus, if they're C Corps, the answer is no, unless they got a dividend out of those. Plus, even if they did, let's assume that it was profitable, right? And they paid a dividend to these people, right? That dividend will probably ultimately have to work at, I'm talking about some rather illicit stuff here, right? Would ultimately have to flow its way back here, because one of the attributes here is you don't have the typical, attributes of a shareholder, right? You're not entitled to the distributions that are proportional to your ownership interest. You don't have equity at risk, and you don't have the normal rights and rewards of ownership. Nate?
Well, I know that with the example of like Madoff and the thing that he did, he at least thought that he could carry that on as long as the economy didn't tank until he was dead. Where did they think this was going? I mean, they had to know that this wasn't going to...
Listen, there were a lot of things that were happening at the time. I mean, these guys were called the smartest guys in the room. I'm gonna draw a transaction for you that a lot of these, not just Enron, WorldCom, does that one ring a bell? That was another. So let's take a look at, a lot of people were laying fiber on the ground at the time. It was costing billions of dollars. So what happened is WorldCom would sell what was called IRU, to Enron. I'm just using those, there was a lot of other companies, World, what's it called, World Crossings, or, you know, so there are all these companies that were doing all this stuff. This is sort of the 2000 melt up, okay, 2000, 2001. So WorldCom would sell an indefeasible right of use of their fiber optic to Enron. So they're going to say, I want to sell you a right to use my fiber for 20 years, and you're going to pay me $200 million as you use it. So WorldCom was saying debit, account receivable, 200 million. And what were they crediting? Sales, 200 million.
Huh?
And they hadn't collected any of it. Now, you're going to say, well, why would Enron do this? So what would Enron do here? What was the other side of Enron's thing here? They would debit. What was their journal entry? So they would debit
Unpaid.
a fixed asset. So they were creating a fixed asset called indefeasible right to use for $200 million. And what was the credit? An account payable of $200 million. Okay? But it didn't stop there. Because you can say, well, why would Enron do this? Well, that was a round trip. So that Enron would sell to WorldCom $200 million worth of indefeasible right to use on some of their fiber, and they would do the same exact thing. They would create a $200 million revenue and a $200 million receivable, and these guys would book a fixed asset of $200 million and an account payable of $200 million. And the sad thing is their auditors were letting them get away with that. I mean, that's what brought Arthur Andersen down, which is really the most respected of the accounting firms at the time. So they were letting them do this stuff. So no money changed hands, but now you've got two companies that have $200 million worth of income and no expenses.
What?
And $200 million worth of assets, and they haven't paid anything. So, I mean, there's a lot of funky stuff going on. Listen, this is just one of the tricks these people were using, okay? So, anyway. So these people were just so, I don't know what made them think, to answer the question, that they could get away with it. You know, at the end of the day, you know, there's people put money in their pockets. I mean, we haven't talked about it in this class. There's something called an agency conflict. An agency conflict is that you've got shareholders that own a company that have equity at risk, and they've got certain objectives. What's their objective? Maximize their equity and maximize their returns, right? If you're management, what are your objectives?
Keep your job.
Make your job. Is your objective the same one as the owner?
No. No.
Probably not. Well, so that's where the agency conflict is. You're the agent for the owner, but you may not necessarily have the same inherent, you know, interests. And so that's why people theoretically use stock options and stock grants and things like that, because what you want to do is align management's objectives with ownership. But a lot of these guys, all they cared about was, you know, they were earning these huge bonuses and all that, and you know, the stock price kept going up, and people believe their own BS at the end of the day. You know, I mean, yes, Oz.
Oh, with the variable interest entity, when you're saying this consolidation, that's only for the IRS, right? Because when we did that case study.
Not for the IRS.
This is GAAP. This has nothing to do.
Oh, that is
General
GAAP.
accounting.
We're not, the tax is done.
Oh,
We're
okay,
not talking
okay,
about
okay.
GAAP tax anymore. Tax is 80%. And tax doesn't have a concept of a VIE or whatever. Tax is if you own 80% of the common stock of this entity, you're gonna.
That's it.
That's it. GAAP gets a lot more complicated because they're not following certain rules. They're trying to give the reader an informed look at what the true financial condition and results of operation of a company are. So, ARB 51 here basically says, if you own more than 50%, you have to consolidate. FIN 46 says, if you have a VIE, you have to consolidate. Now, what does consolidation mean? What does consolidation mean?
Reported as a business line?
Put together.
No, not as a business line. You group all of the lines, you do a line-by-line consolidation. So let's just kind of draw one out. Let's say I've got parent company, and I got subsidiary number 1 and subsidiary number 2. Okay? I'm going to take my balance sheet, and I'm going to say cash, accounts receivable, inventory, etc., right? And I'm going to take whatever I have here, and I'm going to add them all the way across. Now, I'm going to eliminate intercompany balances and transactions. So I don't want to double up, right? If subsidiary A sells to subsidiary B, I don't want to have, you know, sales on one side and purchases on the other that are grossing up numbers. Because at the end of the day, what you sold to yourself has a net value of 0. So you eliminate intercompany balances, and then you come up with a consolidated.
The subsidiaries are reported pro rata or proportionally or whatever, or not?
No, this is a line-by-line consolidation. So subsidiary, so when parent company issues financial statements, its financial statements are consolidated. Consolidated. You may sporadically see a footnote with a consolidating spreadsheet that shows you how it's comprised, but typically, when you look at Kilroy has 50 SPVs that they own, or 80 REITs, you know, up REITs that they own, right? They're all consolidated. You don't see how much each one was, right? You just see all of the activity. Now, what you may not have noticed is there is one line item that reflects the interest or the percentage that you don't own, and that's called minority interest. And so you essentially subtract from your equity the amount that you don't proportionally own. Does that make sense? Kind
It's
of,
like if
like
it's a
just
fund.
on a concept? Yeah.
All this public stock, all the stock is not owned by the company. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying, well, let me make sure I clarify that. A public company issues financial statements. If a public company has multiple subsidiaries, it will consolidate all those subsidiaries in which it owns more than 50%. If it owns more than 50% but less than 100, it has to account for what the other people own.
Net ownership. It's taking it off that.
It's basically, right, so if the equity, if the summation of all this would have equity of 100, but you really only own 70%,
Minority.
you have to create a minority interest line, okay? And so I did this for the balance sheet, you do this for the income statement as well. And so you report consolidated sales, consolidated cost of sales, consolidated selling expenses, etc. And the proportional profit that doesn't belong to you also gets reflected as minority interest. You don't have to do a consolidation, but just understand that a consolidation is a line-by-line grouping of all of the assets, liabilities, income, and expenses of a parent company and its subsidiaries that it must consolidate, or its variable interest entities that it must consolidate. Okay? Yeah? That's pretty simple. I mean, theory. We do something called purchase. This is what's called purchase accounting. There used to be something else called pooling of interest, but we don't do that stuff anymore. So, what happens if you don't own 50%? What do you do?
I own way less than 50% of the company.
So that's ARB 51. APB 18 tells us that if we own more than 20% of the stock in a company, there's a presumption that we have some influence, but we may not control it. So if we own more than 20%, but less than 50, APB 18 tells us to do the equity basis of accounting. Okay? So the equity basis of accounting is not a pro rata. It's not a pro rata recognition, but it is a one-line consolidation. And you're going to say, wow, how the heck do you do that? Well, the reality is most real estate is reported here. Most developers that have to do this most people have 50% or less, right? When you have a joint venture, you got two guys that have 50%, none of them control. They both have influence, but none of them control, so they both have to apply the equity basis of accounting. So what you're trying to mimic in the equity basis of accounting is what your residual ownership interest is in a subsidiary on your balance sheet, and what your residual profit or losses are in the operations of the subsidiary. What do I mean by that? Let's take an example, very simple example. Let's take a parent company that only has one activity. It has, okay, it has a 50% or has a $50 investment in a subsidiary, which accounts for 50% of that subsidiary, okay? So, that subsidiary has two partners, okay? Let's assume there's no debt, okay? That's 100 of assets and 100 of liabilities, right? I'm sorry, and 100 of equity, right? What the goal of the one-line consolidation is to, on one line, a line called investments in unconsolidated subsidiaries, and you may have seen that. You may have seen that if you focus on some of the balance sheets on the supplemental case study. You may have seen investments in unconsolidated subsidiaries. You would have in a long-term asset section, investment in unconsolidated subsidiaries, 50, which is essentially a proportional share of the equity in the underlying subsidiary that you have. If this subsidiary over the course of a year makes a profit of 20, and let's make it very simple, it sold something and it collected $20 of cash, right? Okay? Its equity is now 120, right? So that's at the end of X1. What you need to do is you need to reflect both on your income statement your proportional result and your proportional ownership interest. So I know it's going to be even more complicated. You do something called, you go investments in unconsolidated subsidiaries and you debit 10. And what's 10? 10 is your 50% of the 20, right? And this is a balance sheet entry. And then on your income statement, you do the same thing. Results in investments in unconsolidated subsidiaries, 10. And this goes to the P&L. So now in your P&L, you show a profit of 10 related to your 50% interest in the profits of 20 that the subsidiary made. And you now have increased your 50 on your balance sheet to 60 to reflect the proportional share that you have in the equity of the subsidiary. Yeah? Okay, you don't have to do these things. You don't have to do these things. But you should know that if you own more than 50% of a company, you got to do a line-by-line consolidation. You should know, and in that line-by-line consolidation, there's something called minority interest, which represents the portion of the equity that you don't own. You should know that if you exercise influence over a company, but don't have controlling interests, okay, that you do a one-line consolidation, which basically shows on your balance sheet and on your income statement your proportionate underlying equity in the subsidiary and your proportionate profit or loss from that the activity of that subsidiary during the fiscal period. Yeah?
Investment in what? In
unconsolidated subsidiaries. And that's a description you'll see. You'll see that. Okay, you'll see that. Now, what happens if you don't own 20%? What happens if you own less than 20%?
I would guess.
Guess.
Maybe you put it down the cost. No one else said it, so.
No.
I wrote it, right? So it used to be a little bit more.
Arrows even.
It's a lot more this is all a lot more complicated. So the presumption is that if you own less than 20% of a company, you don't exercise any kind of control. And hence you're not going to do any kind of consolidation. Bless you. You're not going to do a line-by-line consolidation. You're not going to do a one-line consolidation. You're just going to reflect your investment at cost. Okay? Now, it's a lot more complicated. It used to be very simple. FASB 12 was, you essentially went through evaluation. Now you've got like FASB 159, and this gets really complex with whether it's a trading investment or it's held to maturity. And because remember, we're conservative accountants. Do we reflect it at cost or lower of cost and market? So we're not going to get into all evaluation stuff. The easy thing to say is a lot of times you see a company will take up to a 19.9% interest in somebody else. Why 19.9? So they don't reach the threshold to do the equity basis of accounting, okay? That's number one. And so basically you're reflecting your investment at cost, subject to fair value, 144 and 159, subject to fair value assessment, okay? And you're reflecting any dividends that you get as current income. So you have your cost, subject to market, subject to fair value is probably the right way to say it, and then you recognize any income that you receive as on a current basis. Okay? And that's it. That's it. I mean, we can go into, but when you look at financial statements now, right, now you can say, hey, now I understand when it says consolidated financial statements, what it means. When I see a line on my balance sheet that says investment in unconsolidated subsidiaries, I know what that means. When I see a line on a balance sheet that says minority interest, I know what it means. When I look at a P&L and I see results in unconsolidated subsidiaries, I know what it means. When I see a line item that says minority interest, I know what it means. Okay? What you're basically saying is, I control the investment, and I've reflected it all, taking into account what I don't own. I have influence, I don't consolidate, but I've got some equity somewhere. Now, that's going to go up and down based upon the results of that subsidiary. Okay? I don't know, I mean, I got a lot more here, but I don't know that I don't want to spend any more time on that. A couple of things that are important. I think a couple of things that are important.
One second, please.
Yeah.
So this is to comply with GAAP requirements, and that is, unlike taxes, which you
Tax
file every
80%.
year.
In tax, it's binary. You own 80% or more, there's only, the one that owns 80% of the sub files one tax return. Otherwise, each entity has to file its tax return.
You file a tax return annually, but how do you report to GAAP? Annually?
Well, so typically companies issue financial statements formally once a year, informally every month. If you're publicly traded, you have an obligation to disclose every quarter.
Shareholders, right.
And so, let's assume you're not a publicly traded company and you've got bank loans. Well, the bank's going to require either monthly or quarterly statements depending on the relationship that you have with them. If you're a real estate company and you've got limited partners, you're a developer, you're an asset manager, and you have limited partners, how often are you going to report to them? Depends on what you agree with them. Probably quarterly. Probably quarterly. How often are you going to issue a formal report with an audit? Probably annually. And in most cases, you're going to get a tax return done and you're going to get an audit. So, the audit, so you typically hire an accounting firm that will do an audit, and then our tax department will do the tax return. That way the tax people know that the financial statements or the transactions are, recorded in such a way that they can now make the interpretations to change from what was reported from GAAP to what the government requires. Okay, and I skipped a bunch of stuff on, there's something called FASB 109, which talks about how you deal with GAAP with tax. I didn't go into that with you. Okay, because that's just even more complication, but the process is that a sizable company will hire an audit firm to help pull together financial statements and give some sort of fidelity on statements, and then somebody in their tax department, knowing that those numbers have been scrubbed and that are good, will now go on ahead and prepare tax returns. Okay? And then as an investor, you're going to get a K-1 and you're going to get an audit. They're prepared under totally different bases. When I say, hey, these statements are good, and I can declare this on my tax return. I can put this on my 1040 without a problem.
Because you've had this outside entity, your Deloitte or your kind of company comes in.
Exactly. And now, I mean, I've got investments in real estate entities where there are audits done or some sort of assurance. Again, I don't want to get into, there's different levels of assurance. You can do audits, you can do SARS 1 reviews, you can do compilations. There's different levels of, but where there will be an external auditor that will issue some sort of report. And then there's some where I just get a K-1. And they're, I think, almost always done by an external firm now. Just because of the complexity of the tax code. Very few people do compliance in-house. Very few people today do compliance in-house. Most people will outsource all of their filing. Just because you really can't afford to pay for a big enough department to do all of that in-house and feel comfortable with it. And as long as it's a reputable firm, then you go with it. Now, I'll give you an example. I have not filed, this is the first time in my life I've never filed my tax return on time. And I got two K-1s that happened to be from my old employer. And they're deals I'm invested in, and their tax attorneys came back and said, or their tax accountants came back and said, look, here's the K-1, we think it's good, but we know there's some revenue rulings coming out in June. And we're not going to file the partnership return. So here's your K-1 the way we interpret the law right now, so that you can make your estimated payments. And when we get the rulings, we'll make sure that we prepared this right, and then we'll file the return and either modify the K-1 we gave you or tell you that it's good and for you to file it. And so, again, I'm at a point where, okay, well, it makes sense to me, it makes sense. They've hired a good firm. They're not sure, and they're just, they're biding time. But, yeah, I mean, I kind of tried to press the CFO. I'm like, come on, Ralph, it's not that big a deal, dude. Just file the damn return and and he's like, no, no, we're going to do this right. So, anyway, couple of quick things. If you're contributing assets into a venture, that's not cash. If you're contributing assets into a venture, as the investor, you record your investment at your cost basis. So, going back to the first case study, I own a piece of land that's worth $1 million, but I only paid $500 for it. My investment in the subsidiary is at $500. The venture records it at fair market value. But the investor maintains his basis in the property. Because he doesn't step up the basis for GAAP purposes. He doesn't step up the basis until the earnings cycle is complete. Until that's sold to a third party. Okay? And that also goes with any contribution of time or service. Your sweat equity. You get 50% of the interest in this venture because you brought the deal. Well, your basis is only whatever you've actually invested in it, not your knowledge. Oh, my relationship, your basis. Now, the venture is going to value what it's receiving at fair market value. But the investor only records the investment at his or her cost. Okay? Bunch of other stuff. If assets are impaired, you have an impairment. We talked about that. In the cost basis, you're always subject to fair value. Really, in any of these, you're always subject to fair value assessments, okay? All right. Any questions on that? No? Okay. I wanna go over the case study, and then I wanna prepare for the next case study. Only 6 of you did it, I'm not gonna repeat my thoughts on that, I already gave you my thoughts on that, but you're welcome to participate whether you submit it or. Oh, everybody who did it got 100. They did? So, anyway, that's the reward for doing it. So, I hope if you didn't do it, you at least read it. And so I'm gonna kind of go through it so you can at least kind of do it as a class. Very exaggerated, kind of made this up. But I thought it was important to kind of take a look at some of these concepts and try to develop some sort of rationale or thought process, okay? We got a guy, he owns, let's kind of go through the thing. We've got a guy, an entity, these are, so they're exaggerated, but these things happen in real life. We got these guys that own 3 assets, okay? I want to assume for a second they were developed at different times. These guys built these 2 assets in a CBD. They were